Yes, Kian confirmed cautiously. She guided us to the heart, explained our purpose. Something like hope flashed across Malric's weathered features. Then there's still a chance. He glanced nervously at the sky, then back to them. But not here. Too exposed. They watch the nodes, especially after dark. They? Elena asked, though part of her didn't want the answer. The shadow touched. Humans and shifters who've been changed. Corrupted. Malric gestured toward his vehicle. An ancient station wagon rusted at the edges, nearly invisible in the darkest corner of the lot. My place isn't far. Warded. Safe, at least for tonight. Kian's expression remained skeptical. How do we know you're not one of them? Malric's lips twisted in a bitter smile. Fair question. But think about it. If I was shadow-touched, would I be living in my car at the edge of nowhere? They're drawn to power, to places they can spread discord. He nodded toward the heart. Besides, that thing would know. It wouldn't pulse toward me if I was tainted. As if to confirm his words, the heart flared brighter in Elena's palm, its golden threads forming a pattern that pointed unmistakably in Malric's direction. I think he's telling the truth, she said quietly to Kian, and we need information about what happened before, about what we're facing now. Kian held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slightly. All right. But at the first sign of trouble, we run, Elena finished, surprising herself with how naturally the we came to her lips. Somehow, in the space of days, her world had narrowed to this partnership, this shared purpose. Good, Malric said, already moving toward his station wagon. Follow me close, and whatever you do, don't stop if you see anything unusual on the road. Malric's place turned out to be an abandoned fire tower deep in the woods, accessible only by a rutted dirt road that seemed intentionally unmaintained. The tower itself rose skeletal against the night sky, a steel framework supporting a small cabin at its peak, perhaps 40 feet above the forest floor. Home sweet home, Malric muttered as he killed the station wagon's engine. Not much, but the height helps. They don't like to climb. The statement sent a chill down Elena's spine. Who doesn't like to climb? Malric just shook his head, grabbing a worn backpack from the passenger seat. Better to show you inside. After dark, best not to linger in the open. They followed him to the base of the tower, where a metal ladder led upward. Rust flaked beneath Elena's hands as she climbed, the structure creaking ominously with each step. At the top, Malric unlocked a heavy padlock and pushed open a trapdoor, ushering them into his sanctuary. The cabin was small but surprisingly orderly. A narrow cot occupied one wall, a makeshift kitchen another. Maps and newspaper clippings covered nearly every available surface, connected by red strings that formed an intricate web of something. Research, conspiracy, obsession. Most striking, though, were the symbols painted on every window and across the ceiling. The same spiral markings Elena had seen in the cave system and the grove, glowing faintly in the darkness with a light of their own. Protection glyphs, Malric explained, noticing her attention. Ancient language. Keeps them from seeing in, from listening. He moved to a camp stove in the corner, lighting it with practiced efficiency. Tea? It's just herbs, but it helps with the chill. Elena accepted the offer with a nod, still absorbing the strangeness of their surroundings. Kian remained standing, his posture vigilant, eyes taking in every detail of the small space as if cataloging potential threats. You said you survived the last incursion, he said, cutting directly to the heart of why they were here. Tell us what happened. Everything you remember. Malric's hands stilled momentarily in their preparation of the tea. Some things you don't forget, no matter how much you might want to. He filled 3 chipped mugs with steaming water, then settled heavily onto a wooden stool. I was young, barely 20 in human years. Part of the Lakeside Pack that controlled territory from here to Chicago. We were traditional, kept to ourselves, hunted deer, avoided humans. His amber eyes grew distant with memory. Then the dreams started. Everyone in the pack having the same nightmare, shadows moving beneath the surface of the lake, calling to us. Our alpha dismissed it as superstition. He passed mugs to Elena and Kian, the herbal scent rising with the steam, something earthy and bitter, but not unpleasant. Soon after, we started finding animals along the shore, wrong somehow. Physically twisted, aggressive beyond reason. Malric's voice dropped. Then it happened to one of our own. Dario, pack beta, strong, level-headed. Found him standing in the shallows one morning staring into the water. When he turned, Malric shuddered visibly. His eyes were black. Not just the iris, everything. Like looking into empty space. He spoke, but the voice wasn't his. Said the barriers were thin, that the hunger was returning, that we would all serve as vessels. Elena felt her skin crawl at the description. It matched too perfectly with what the keeper had told them about entities that fed on fear, on discord. What happened to him? Kian asked. Our Alpha tried to restrain him, to help him. Dario killed him with one swipe, strength he'd never had before. Malric took a long sip of his tea, his hand trembling slightly. After that, it spread quickly. More pack members began to change, not just their eyes, but their behavior. They started hunting humans, not for food, but for conversion, like they were recruiting. Converting them to what? Elena asked, though she dreaded the answer. To vessels. Malric's amber eyes fixed on hers. The entities can't fully materialize in our world, not at first. They need hosts. The more fear they create, the thinner the barriers become. How did you stop it? Kian pressed. Malric's expression darkened further. We didn't, not really. There was an old shifter living apart from the pack, a woman named Sarah. She knew about the ancient ways, kept records similar to what you'd find with a keeper. She gathered those of us who remained unchanged and led us to a node, a power point where the barriers could be reinforced. He rose abruptly, moving to one of the map-covered walls. With surprising gentleness, he lifted a weathered leather pouch that hung from a nail. From it, he removed what appeared to be a fragment of stone, blue-green, similar to the heart of Fenrir, but broken, its light dim and flickering. Sarah had this, a piece of a heartstone, though we didn't know what it was called then. She used it in a ritual that sealed the breach, pushed the entities back. His voice caught. It cost her life, and the lives of everyone who stood with her. I only survived because I was assigned to guard the perimeter. Elena's eyes widened in shock. Everyone died? How? The ritual required blood, willingly given. Malric carefully returned the stone fragment to its pouch. But it worked. The shadow touched were cut off from their source. Most went mad, died. A few like me were caught in between, marked but not converted. He gestured to his partially shifted arm. Been watching ever since. 52 years of waiting for the signs to return. And now they have? His gaze shifted to the heart in Elena's hand. But this time you have a whole stone, and there are two of you. The bond makes the difference. What bond? Kian asked sharply. Malric's lips twisted in a knowing smile. Don't play dumb, Shifter. I can smell it on you both, the resonance. Human and wolf connected. It's what the original Guardians had before everything fell apart. It's why the heart chose you. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks, though she couldn't have explained why. The connection between them was still so new, so undefined, and yet already it seemed to define them in the eyes of others. If what you're saying is true, she said, steering the conversation back to practicalities, then the Chicago area is already experiencing another incursion. But we haven't seen any reports, any signs. Because it's still early, Malric interrupted. Subtle. Dreams first, then animal behavior, then isolated incidents that look like mental breaks or drug episodes. He pointed to one of the newspaper clippings on his wall, a headline about a local man who'd attacked his family, claiming shadowy figures had told him to do it. It's happening again. But slower this time, more careful. Like they learned from last time. His expression grew urgent. The node in Chicago, it's stronger than the one Sarah used. If you can reach it, use the heart there, you might be able to push them back before they fully manifest. And where exactly is this node? Kian asked. Malric moved to another map, this one of downtown Chicago, marked with concentric circles radiating from a central point. Here, he said, tapping the center, where the old water tower stands. built right on top of it, probably not by accident. Old buildings like that, they're often placed on PowerPoints. Elena studied the map, memorizing the location. And you're certain this will work? That we can stop it without the kind of sacrifice Sarah made? Malric's expression softened slightly. The heart you carry is whole, not fractured like hers. And you have what we didn't, a true guardian bond. It amplifies the power, focuses it. He hesitated. But I won't lie to you. There's still risk. Great risk. The cabin fell silent except for the soft hiss of the camp stove. Outside, wind rustled through the forest canopy, carrying with it the normal sounds of night. Insects, the occasional hoot of an owl. Normal sounds that somehow felt like a thin veneer over something much darker. There's one more thing you should know, Malric said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The shadow-touched. They can appear as anyone. Friends, family, strangers. The only way to know for certain is the eyes. When they're actively channeling the entities, their eyes go completely black. Like windows into nothing, Kian murmured, recalling Malric's earlier description. Exactly. Malric nodded grimly. Trust no one whose eyes you can't see clearly. And be careful who you tell about your purpose. The entities have agents everywhere, some knowing, some unwitting. Vex, Elena said suddenly, turning to Kian. You said he'd been acting strangely, becoming more extreme in his views. Could he be influenced at least? Kian agreed, his expression troubled. It would explain the intensity of his pursuit, his refusal to consider the truth about our origins. Malric's head tilted, that canine gesture of curiosity. Vex, the alpha of the Black Pine Pack? When Kian nodded, Malric cursed under his breath. That complicates things. If he's shadow-touched, even partially, he'll be drawn to the heart. And he'll have resources. Followers. We've dealt with him before? Elena said with more confidence than she felt. Not like this, Malric warned. If the entities have taken root in him, he'll be stronger, faster, driven by something beyond his own will. He rose, moving to a battered trunk in the corner. From it, he withdrew a cloth-wrapped bundle. Here, he said, placing it on the small table between them. You'll need these. Elena unwrapped the bundle carefully. Inside lay 2 curved daggers, their blades etched with the same spiral symbols that adorned the cabin's windows. The metal had an unusual bluish tint, catching the light in ways that seemed to defy normal reflection. Silver alloyed with meteor iron, Malric explained, forged by Sarah herself. They won't kill the entities, but they'll disrupt their hold on a host temporarily, enough to give you a fighting chance. Kian lifted one of the blades, testing its balance with the expertise of someone familiar with weapons. You're giving these to us? Why not come with us, help us directly? Malric's bitter smile returned. Look at me, Shifter. I'm broken. Can't fully change, can't channel the old energies properly. He gestured to his partially shifted arm. Besides, someone needs to watch the outer perimeter. Warn you if Vex or others are closing in. Elena sensed there was more to his reluctance. Perhaps fear. Perhaps shame at his condition. Perhaps something darker he wasn't sharing. But she also sensed his sincerity, his genuine desire to help. Thank you, she said simply, meeting his amber gaze directly. For the warning, for the weapons, for everything. Malric nodded once, sharply, then moved to the window. You should rest while you can. Tomorrow will come soon enough, and Chicago is still hours away. He glanced back at them. I'll keep watch tonight. The shadow-touched rarely approached the tower, but with the heart so close they might sense it. As if on cue, the heart pulsed in Elena's hand, its golden threads forming briefly into a pattern that resembled the concentric circles on Malric's map. The node in Chicago was calling to it, or perhaps it was calling to the node. Either way, their path forward was clear. Kian helped Elena arrange the small cot into something they could both use for rest. While Malric settled into a chair by the window, his posture vigilant, eyes fixed on the dark forest below. As exhaustion began to claim her, Elena found herself studying their strange ally, this damaged shifter who had spent half a century watching for a return he must have hoped would never come. What must it be like, she wondered, to live with such purpose, such isolation, such constant vigilance? Her last conscious thought before sleep claimed her was that perhaps she was beginning to understand exactly what it was like. A sound woke her, soft but insistent. Elena blinked into darkness, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Beside her, Kian slept soundly, his breathing deep and even. The cabin was dark except for a faint glow from the protection symbols painted on the windows. Malric was no longer in his chair. Elena sat up slowly, straining to hear. The sound came again, a soft scraping from outside, below the tower. Careful not to wake Kian, she moved to the window and peered down into the darkness. At first she saw nothing. Then, as her eyes adjusted, she made out a figure moving at the base of the tower. Malric, bent over something on the ground. Drawing symbols, she realized. Additional protections around the perimeter. Relief flooded through her. But as she turned to return to the cot, another movement caught her eye, something shifting at the edge of the forest clearing. Something that seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it, a darkness deeper than the night around it. Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat. The shape had no definite form. It flowed like smoke, yet moved with purpose. And it was heading directly toward where Malric worked, oblivious to its approach. She should call out, warn him. But fear paralyzed her vocal cords, a primal terror unlike anything she'd experienced before. This wasn't the fear of a predator, a physical threat. This was existential dread, the certainty that what she was seeing couldn't exist in her reality. The shadow reached Malric. It paused, seeming to regard him with an intelligence that made Elena's skin crawl. Then, with a motion like water flowing uphill, it rose into a vaguely humanoid shape. Malric sensed it then. He spun, amber eyes widening, one hand reaching for something at his belt. Too slow. The shadow engulfed him, wrapping around him like a terrible embrace. Elena's paralysis broke. She turned to wake Kian, but found him already alert, standing beside her at the window. "We need to help him," she whispered urgently. Kian's hand closed around her arm, restraining her. "Wait," he said, his voice tight with tension. Something's not right. Below, the shadow had withdrawn slightly from Malric. The shifter stood motionless for a moment, then slowly raised his head to look directly up at the tower window. At them. Even from this distance, even through the darkness, Elena could see that his eyes had changed. Black. Bottomless. Empty. "It's not attacking him," Kian said softly, realization dawning in his voice. "It's returning to him." "What?" Elena stared in horror as Malric, or the thing that had been Malric, smiled up at them. A terrible knowing smile that exposed teeth now sharper. Longer than before? He was already shadow-touched. Kian continued, pulling her away from the window. The story, the helpful guide routine, it was a trap. To get close to the heart, the trapdoor in the floor suddenly rattled violently, as if struck from below. The protection symbols on the windows flared brighter, but Malric's voice, distorted now, layered with something else, filtered through. "Come now, Guardians. Did you really think it would be so easy? That we wouldn't be waiting for the heart to return?" A harsh laugh, more animal than human. 52 years I've waited. Watched, prepared. The last time your kind pushed us back with a fragment. This time we'll have the whole stone. Kian moved quickly, gathering their few possessions while Elena stood frozen in shock. The daggers Malric had given them. Were they even real protection, or another part of the deception? "The window," Kian urged, snapping her out of her paralysis. "There's a maintenance ladder on the far side. We need to move before he gets in." The trap door shuddered again, the wood beginning to splinter. Malric's voice continued, growing more distorted with each word. "You can't escape us. The boundaries are already thinning. Soon, the hunger will walk this world again, and all will serve as vessels or food." Elena grabbed the heart, clutching it tightly as she followed Kian to the window opposite the trap door. To her surprise, the protection symbols didn't impede them. The glass slid open easily to her touch, as if the ancient glyphs recognized her connection to the heart. The maintenance ladder was barely more than metal rungs bolted to the tower's exterior, but it offered escape. Kian went first, moving with inhuman grace despite the precarious footing. Elena followed, the heart clutched in one hand, the other gripping cold metal as she descended into darkness. Behind them, a crash announced Malric's entry into the cabin. His twisted howl of rage echoed through the night as he discovered their escape route. They reached the ground and ran for the station wagon, only to find its tires slashed, the engine compartment torn open as if by massive claws. Sabotage by the very person who had brought them here. The woods, Kian decided instantly, pulling her toward the tree line opposite where they'd seen the shadow emerge. We need to put distance between us and him. Find somewhere to regroup. As they plunged into the forest, the heart pulsed urgently in Elena's hand, its glow illuminating their path just enough to avoid the worst obstacles. Behind them, another howl split the night, the sound of a hunt beginning. Malric had been right about one thing, Elena realized as they fled deeper into the unknown darkness. The entities had returned. The cycle had begun again. But he'd been wrong about something more important. This time, they weren't facing it with just a fragment of ancient power. This time they had the whole heart, and they had each other. The bond makes the difference, he had said. Now they would discover exactly what that meant. The battered pickup truck Malric produced from behind. The diner looked like it had survived several apocalypses already. Its once blue paint faded to a patchwork of rust and primer. The passenger door secured with baling wire where hinges had surrendered years ago. Elena eyed it skeptically as Malric fiddled with something under the dashboard. "Hot wiring your own truck?" she asked. "Keys are a liability," he grunted, not looking up. "Sometimes you need to abandon everything fast." The engine coughed reluctantly to life, belching a plume of black exhaust. Malric straightened with a satisfied nod. "Chicago's 3 hours east if we push it. Longer if we're careful." "We need to be careful," Kian said from where he stood a few paces back, arms crossed tight over his chest. He hadn't moved closer to the truck, his posture radiating distrust. "The pack will be watching highways, transportation hubs," Malric snorted. "Kid, I've been avoiding packs for 50 years. I know how to travel invisible." The tension between the two men had been building since they left the diner's parking lot, a slow accumulation of unspoken challenge like static before a storm. Elena felt it crackling in the air between them, two predators. One young and fierce, one old and scarred, neither willing to yield ground. "We don't even know if we can trust him," Kian had whispered to her earlier. While Malric was settling their meager bill inside, the heart reacted to him, yes, but it didn't exactly welcome him with open arms. Elena had no answer then. She had no answer now, watching the two shifters circle each other with wary eyes. The heart of Fenrir, warm against her skin where she'd tucked it beneath her shirt, pulsed with steady, insistent rhythm. Neither warning nor welcome. Just awareness. "I'll ride in back," Kian announced suddenly, nodding toward the truck's open bed. "Better vantage point to spot any pursuit." It wasn't the real reason, and they all knew it. He wouldn't put himself in the enclosed space of the cab with Malric if he could avoid it. Malric's weathered face betrayed nothing. "Suit yourself, pup." He gestured to the passenger side. "Lady gets the seat of honor, then." Elena hesitated, looking between them. If she rode with Malric, it might seem like taking sides. If she joined Kian in the truck bed, they'd learn nothing from their newfound dubious ally. "I'll ride up front," she decided finally. "But I want answers on the way." Something like approval flickered in Malric's amber eyes. "Fair enough." He hauled open the passenger door with a screech of protesting metal. "Let's get moving before dawn. Night's still the safest time for our kind." The pre-dawn highway stretched empty before them, the truck's headlights carving a tunnel through darkness. Elena watched farmland and occasional small towns blur past, all shrouded in that peculiar stillness that exists only in the hours before sunrise. In the side mirror, she could see Kian in the truck bed, his back against the cab, face turned to the wind. Eternally vigilant. "He's right not to trust me," Malric said suddenly, breaking the silence that had held for the first 20 miles. "Smart kid." Elena turned from the window. "And should I trust you?" Malric's laugh was a rusty sound, as if seldom used. "Hell no. But you will anyway." Because that rock around your neck tells you something's coming. That's worse than anything I could do to you." His hands were steady on the wheel, scarred knuckles white against the cracked plastic. He drove like someone accustomed to watching the rearview mirror, alert, tense, ready for sudden maneuvers. "What happened 50 years ago?" Elena asked. "The Keeper told us there are cycles, periods when these entities try to break through, but she didn't give details." Malric's jaw tightened, the muscles working beneath his stubbled skin. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped lower, as if the memories themselves might be listening. "I was young, stupid, part of a pack-up in Manitoba. Different structure back then. Less rigid hierarchy, more cooperation." His amber eyes remained fixed on the road, but Elena could tell he was seeing something else entirely. The dream started first. All of us having the same nightmares. Shadows moving against shadows. Voices promising power, knowledge, freedom from human limitations. He flexed his fingers on the wheel, the black veins visible beneath his sleeve pulsing in the dashboard's dim light. Some listened. Some didn't. The pack split, divided over whether these were omens or opportunities. A bitter smile touched his lips. "Sound familiar?" Elena thought of Vex, of the division within his pack over separation versus partnership with humans. History repeating itself. "It always does," Malric confirmed grimly. "That's how they work, finding the natural fault lines, the tensions that already exist, and widening them, turning difference into division, division into hatred. And then people started disappearing. Humans first, in the nearby town. We found pieces." His voice grew distant. "Then shifters too, the ones who'd been most vocal against the voices mostly. We thought it was the work of humans or rival packs. We were wrong." He fell silent again, the truck's engine filling the void with its uneven rumble. Elena waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. "A woman found me," he continued finally. "Human, but not ordinary. Said she'd been waiting, watching for signs. That she needed shifters who hadn't been corrupted yet." Another humorless laugh. "Imagine my surprise when she pulled out a stone like yours. Blue, not green, but the same damn glow. Called it the Heart of Aegir." "The Keeper," Elena breathed. Malric glanced at her sharply. "You met her?" "Yes. She showed us everything. The history, the purpose shifters were created for." He nodded slowly. "Same song and dance she gave us. Guardians against the darkness, protectors of the veil, blah blah. 5 of us believed her. 3 shifters, including me, 2 humans. The rest," his hands tightened on the wheel. "The rest were already too far gone, either actively serving the shadows or too scared to fight." The highway stretched empty before them, the false dawn beginning to lighten the eastern horizon to a pale gray. In the mirror, Elena could see Kian still watching, his dark hair whipping in the wind, his golden eyes catching occasional reflections from passing lights. "She took us to places like that grove you mentioned, trained us, showed us how to recognize the signs, how to seal the smaller breaches. For 2 years we fought a shadow war most of the world never noticed." Malric's voice had gone flat, stripped of emotion. "And then we found the main breach." Elena felt the heart pulse faster against her skin, as if responding to the memory. "Where?" "Chicago." He said it like a curse. "Deep beneath the city, in tunnels older than the subway system. The entities had been working for decades, weakening reality around a convergence point where the barriers were naturally thin. And you fought them?" "We tried." His voice cracked slightly. "We fucking tried. But they were ready for us. They'd been building their forces, corrupting humans and shifters alike. The woman, the Keeper, she knew it was a trap. Knew we might not all make it. But the breach was expanding too fast. In the growing light, Elena could see the shadows beneath his eyes deepen, the lines of his face etching themselves with remembered pain. "What happened?" she asked softly. "We got separated in the tunnels, surrounded. I saw things, not just shadows anymore, but forms half emerged from whatever hell they call home." His breathing had quickened, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air rushing through the truck's broken vents. "One of them caught me." "Those scars?" That's where it touched me, tried to pull me through. He yanked his sleeve back, revealing the black veins that pulsed beneath his skin like living things. In the early morning light, they seemed to writhe, to reach towards the surface. I panicked, shifted and ran. Left the others behind. The admission hung in the air, heavy with decades of shame. The keeper had given each of us a fragment, a splinter of her heartstone to use if things went wrong. I was supposed to use mine with the others to help seal the breach. Instead, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The magnitude of his betrayal was etched in every line of his weathered face. The others closed it without you, Elena concluded quietly. Malric nodded once, a short, sharp movement. At the cost of their lives, the backlash from sealing something that large. It burned them out, all except the keeper. He exhaled slowly. I felt it happen, even as I was running. Felt the barrier snap closed. Felt the shadows scream as they were forced back. And you've been running ever since. It wasn't a question. Hiding. Running. Trying to forget. His amber eyes flicked to hers, then back to the road. But these scars make sure I never can. I feel them, when the barrier's thin again, when they start testing the weak spots. That's why I was at that rest stop. The pain led me there, a beacon I couldn't ignore. Elena studied him in the growing light. This broken, bitter man who carried both the mark of entities beyond comprehension and the weight of his own failure. The heart pulsed against her skin, neither rejecting nor embracing him. And now, she asked, why help us at all? Why not keep running? Malric was silent for a long moment, the miles slipping away beneath the truck's wheels. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a conviction that surprised her. Because they're coming back stronger this time. I can feel it. And because, he hesitated, as if the words themselves were painful to form. Because I've spent 50 years wondering if I could have made a difference. If my friends died because I wasn't there when they needed me. He glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting Kian's watchful gaze for a brief, charged moment before looking away. Your boy back there is right not to trust me. I wouldn't trust me either. His scarred hands tightened on the wheel. But this might be my only chance to finish what I started, to make something right before these damn scars consume me completely. I am Nessa, she said, her gaze moving from the stone to Elena's face with piercing intensity. Leader of the Chicago Enclave, she didn't extend her hand. Instead, she inclined her head in a gesture that seemed both respectful and wary. The heart chooses its bearers carefully. That it accepted human touch. Her glance flickered briefly to Kian, and allows wolfkin to guide it, suggests the cycle has indeed turned as our dreams foretold. From the shadows behind her, a man stepped forward, human, Elena realized with surprise. Mid-40s, perhaps, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered look of someone who'd spent years outdoors. Unlike the others, his eyes were ordinary brown, but they carried an extraordinary weight of knowledge. I'm Daniel, he said, his voice carrying the faintest trace of an accent Elena couldn't place. Historian of the Enclave, we've been expecting you, though not precisely you. Malric snorted, leaning against the damp tunnel wall. They never expected me to come back either. Life's full of disappointments. Nessa's cold gaze slid to him. Especially you, shadow-touched. Your presence with the heart-bearers is concerning. Yet here I stand, Malric replied with a sharp-toothed grin, alive when better folk aren't. The tension crackled between them like static electricity. Elena could feel the heart responding, its pulse growing erratic in her palms. She closed her fingers around it, drawing everyone's attention back. We don't have time for this, she said, finding strength in her voice she hadn't known was there. The entities are breaking through again. The pack that's hunting us may already be influenced by them. And if what the Keeper told us is true, we need to find allies, not enemies. Daniel studied her with new interest. You've spoken with a Keeper? We have, Kian answered, his stance relaxing slightly at the mention of their guide. In the grove, she showed us the truth about shifters, about humans, about what we once were together. Nessa and Daniel exchanged a weighted glance. The historian nodded almost imperceptibly. Follow us, Nessa commanded, turning with that same eerie grace. The tunnels aren't safe for extended conversation. The shadows have ears here. The assembled watchers parted, forming a corridor through which they were led deeper into the underground network. Some fell into step behind them, others melted away down side passages, presumably to maintain their guard positions. Elena noticed the precision of their movements. This was clearly a well-organized group accustomed to surviving in secrecy. Kian stayed close to her side, his presence warm and solid. Malric trailed behind, oddly quiet now, his amber eyes scanning the walls as if reading messages Elena couldn't see. They walked for nearly 10 minutes, descending further, passing through areas where the brick tunnels gave way to rougher stone passages that looked far older than the freight system Malric had mentioned. The air grew warmer instead of colder, and a faint orange glow appeared ahead. The passage opened suddenly into a vast underground chamber that stole Elena's breath. It might once have been a natural cavern, but it had been expanded and reinforced over what must have been centuries. Brick arches supported sections of the ceiling. Electricity had been rigged from somewhere above, illuminating a space that functioned as a hidden community. At least 30 people moved through the chamber, some clearly shifters of various types, others unmistakably human. They worked together with the ease of long practice, maintaining equipment, preparing food at a communal kitchen area, studying maps spread across tables. Along one wall stood bookshelves filled with ancient-looking volumes. Nearby, a medical station had been established with surprisingly modern equipment. Children, both human and shifter, Elena realized with a start, played quietly in a corner where someone had painted a mural of trees and sky. "Welcome," Daniel said, gesturing to the chamber. "To the Chicago Alliance." Elena turned slowly, taking it all in. "How long has this been here?" "In some form?" "Nearly 100 years," Daniel replied, "though this particular location only for the past 20. We relocate when necessary." "You're all living together," Kian observed, his voice hushed with wonder. "Humans and shifters." Nessa's expression softened slightly. "As we were meant to, as we once did, before the Great Division." "You know," Elena said, surprised. "Not all knowledge was lost," Daniel explained. "Some families, shifter and human alike, preserved fragments of the truth. Passed down stories, sacred objects, warnings." He gestured toward a locked cabinet across the room. "We have our own artifacts, though none as powerful as the heart you carry. And you've been—" "What? Waiting for the cycle to turn again?" Kian asked, skepticism edging his voice. "Preparing," Nessa corrected firmly. "Training, building networks across cities, watching for signs." Her ice-blue eyes narrowed. "They have been increasing these past months. Rifts appearing briefly, strange behavior in those susceptible to influence. Weather patterns disrupted by energies that don't belong in our world." Malric, who had been unusually silent, suddenly laughed, a harsh bark that drew every eye in the chamber. "Tell them the rest, bird shifter. Tell them how your preparations are failing." Nessa's expression hardened, but Daniel placed a restraining hand on her arm. "He's right," the historian admitted reluctantly. "3 of our outposts have gone silent in the past. Weak, Minneapolis, Detroit, Indianapolis, all cities with nodes like Chicago's, places where the veil has always been thinner." "They're coming through, faster this time," Malric said, his scarred arm visibly pulsing beneath his sleeve. "And they're not just influencing. They're taking." A chill ran down Elena's spine. "Taking? Taking what?" "People," Daniel answered grimly. "Bodies, minds. We're not sure exactly how, but reports before communication was lost described individuals changing, becoming violent, unpredictable, their eyes—" "Wrong somehow? Possession?" Kian asked, tension returning to his stance. "Not as humans understand it," Nessa said. "More like corruption. As if something rewrites them from within." Elena's fingers tightened around the heart. She felt it responding to her distress, warmth pulsing against her skin. "The Keeper said they couldn't directly possess, only influence." "The Keeper lied," Malric said bluntly. "Or didn't know. Things have changed since the last cycle. The barriers are weaker. What came before was just their fingers reaching through the cracks. This time, he trailed off, his amber eyes darkening. This time they're pushing their whole damn fists through. A heavy silence fell over the group. Around them, the bustle of the underground community continued, but it seemed more desperate now, preparations for a storm everyone could sense approaching. "We should talk somewhere private," Daniel finally said. "Bring the heart. There's much to share and little time to do it." They gathered in what appeared to be a war room, a smaller chamber off the main cavern, its walls covered with maps marked with colored pins, timelines, and strange symbols Elena didn't recognize. A heavy wooden table dominated the center, scarred with age and use. Nessa took position at the head of the table with Daniel at her right hand. Several others joined them, a lean man with silver eyes who was introduced as Marco, head of security, a middle-aged woman named Helen with ordinary human appearance but an air of authority that suggested significant standing, and a younger shifter named Talia, whose emerald cat eyes watched Elena with unconcealed curiosity. "Show us what the heart has revealed," Nessa instructed once they were settled. Elena placed the green stone on the table's center. It continued to pulse, but didn't project images as it had in the grove or the mountain chamber. She explained this with a frown. "It seems to respond differently in different places. I'm not sure how to control it." "You don't," Malric said from his position leaning against the wall. "It controls you. All you can do is listen and hope you're interpreting right." Nessa shot him a cold glare before turning back to Elena. "Tell us what you've learned. Everything from the beginning." Elena exchanged a glance with Kian, who nodded encouragingly. Together they recounted their journey, from their chance meeting on the mountain road through their escape from Vex's pack, their time in the grove, and the Keeper's revelations about the ancient alliance between humans and shifters. As they spoke, Elena noticed the others' reactions. Daniel took careful notes. Marco remained impassive, though his silver eyes narrowed at mention of the entities. Helen nodded occasionally as if confirming things she'd already suspected. Talia leaned forward, absorbing every detail with the intensity of youth. Nessa simply listened, her bird-like stillness unnerving. When they finished, silence hung in the air for several heartbeats before Daniel spoke. "Your account matches our oldest records," he said, tapping his notebook. "Though you've filled gaps we've debated for generations. The origin of shifters as engineered guardians. Some suspected, but we had no confirmation. What matters now isn't history," Marco interjected, his voice carrying a faint Slavic accent. "It's strategy. If the entities are breaking through at multiple nodes, we need to coordinate resistance." "With what forces?" Malric scoffed. "Your little underground clubs in a handful of cities? Against beings that exist partly outside reality?" "We are not as few as you think, shadow-touched," Nessa replied coolly. "The Alliance extends across continents. We may be hidden, but we are not small." "Nessa speaks truth," Helen added, her first contribution to the conversation. "I coordinate with European enclaves. Similar networks exist in Asia, Africa, South America. The old knowledge survived in pockets everywhere, as did partnerships between certain shifter lineages and human families." Elena blinked in surprise. "You're saying there's an international network of—" "What? Secret guardians?" "Precisely," Daniel confirmed. "Though network suggests more organization than actually exists. We're connected but loosely. Each enclave operates independently, sharing information when possible. Technology has made that easier in recent decades. Which brings us to our current situation," Marco said, rising to indicate several red pins clustered in the Midwest region of a large map. "As Daniel mentioned, we've lost contact with 3 enclaves. But there's a pattern to the silence." Kian studied the map intently. "They're closing in on Chicago. Creating a perimeter?" Marco nodded, something like approval flickering in his silver eyes. "My assessment as well. Chicago houses the strongest node in the region, a confluence of energies that has drawn both humans and shifters for centuries. The entities want control of the node," Nessa stated. "If they secure it, they can widen the breach exponentially." "That's why the heart guided us here," Elena realized, watching the stone pulse faster as if confirming her words. Not just to find allies, but because this is where the danger is most immediate. Or to ensure its own survival, Malric muttered darkly. The hearts were created to seal breaches. Maybe it just wants to be where the action is, regardless of whether you survive using it. Talia, who had remained silent until now, suddenly spoke. I don't think that's true. Her young voice carried surprising conviction. I've dreamed of the heart for months now. It's not just a tool, it's alive in its way. It chooses bearers who have a chance. Dreams? Elena asked, curious about this young shifter who spoke with such certainty. Talia is our seer, Daniel explained. Her cat lineage carries strong connection to the between spaces. Her dreams often reveal what is hidden from the rest of us. The girl ducked her head slightly at the attention, but continued. I saw you coming, not your faces, but your essence. Wolf and human, bound by choice rather than blood or obligation. Her emerald eyes fixed on Elena. The heart chose you because you chose each other when you had every reason not to. That's the alliance it seeks to rebuild. A heavy weight seemed to settle on Elena's shoulders at these words. The responsibility of being chosen, of representing something larger than herself. Beside her, Kian shifted slightly, his arm pressing against hers in silent support. Prophecy is well and good, Marco said, his practical tone breaking the moment. But we need action. Our scouts report increased activity around the city perimeter. Strange lights in abandoned buildings. People going missing. If the entities are establishing a foothold, we need to know where and how. I can tell you where, Malric said, pushing away from the wall. For the first time since they'd entered the enclave, his perpetual smirk was gone, replaced by grim certainty. They'll use the node itself, the place where energy already flows between worlds. The old water tower, Nessa confirmed, exchanging a look with Daniel. We've had watchers there for weeks. Nothing yet, but they wouldn't see it until too late, Malric interrupted. Trust me on this, bird shifter. I've felt the shadows growing stronger since we entered the city. They're gathering for something big, and soon. As if responding to his words, the heart suddenly flared brighter on the table, its green light pulsing in a rapid, urgent rhythm. At the same moment, a young shifter burst into the room, breathing hard. Nessa, he gasped. The northern sentries just reported in. There's movement at the tower site. Lights where there shouldn't be. And he hesitated, face pale. They say the air itself seems to be tearing. The war room erupted into motion. Marco began issuing orders to gather their defense teams. Helen moved to a communication station in the corner, presumably to alert other enclaves. Talia watched with wide eyes as Daniel quickly gathered specific books and papers. Nessa remained calm, her ice-blue gaze meeting Elena's across the table. It seems the heart brought you just in time, she said. The question now is whether you're ready to use it. Elena stared down at the pulsing stone. I don't even know how. None of us fully do, Daniel said kindly. The hearts were always partly mystery, but they respond to need and intention. In the moment of crisis, instinct may guide you more truly than instruction. We can't just throw them at the breach with no preparation, Marco objected. We have no choice, Nessa replied. The heart chose them. We must trust that choice, even if we don't understand it. Kian's hand found Elena's under the table, fingers intertwining with quiet strength. We'll figure it out together, he said softly, for her ears alone. Malric pushed off from the wall, stretching like a predator rousing itself for the hunt. Well, isn't this touching, he drawled, though the usual mockery in his voice was tempered with something darker. The big moment arrives, and all we have is blind faith and a pretty rock. What we have, Elena countered, rising to meet his gaze, is the alliance the heart wanted. Humans and shifters working together again. Maybe that's more powerful than any of us understand. The scarred shifter studied her for a long moment, before a strange smile curved his lips. Not his usual sardonic grin, but something almost genuine. Maybe, he conceded. Or maybe we're all about to die horribly. Either way, I'm done hiding. Nessa clapped her hands once, the sharp sound cutting through the room's tension. Prepare to move out in 20 minutes. Marco, assemble your teams. Helen, ensure the enclave is secured in our absence. Daniel, bring whatever references might help us understand what we're facing. She turned to Elena and Kian, her bird-like gaze intense. And you, bring the heart. It's time to see if destiny chose wisely. As they filed out to prepare, Elena clutched the warm stone in her palm, feeling its pulse synchronize with her own heartbeat. What had begun as a chance encounter on a rainy mountain road had led her here, to the front lines of a battle most of humanity didn't even know was being fought. She caught Kian watching her, his golden eyes reflecting the heart's glow. "Second thoughts?" he asked quietly. Elena took a deep breath, steadying herself against the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "About 1,000 of them," she admitted. "But also a strange certainty, like I've been preparing for this my whole life without knowing it." His hand found hers again, warm and solid. "The heart chose well," he said simply. Whether that was true would be tested very soon. As they joined the others gathering in the main chamber, Elena could feel the change in the air, a heaviness, a wrongness that scraped against her nerves. The heart pulsed faster in her grip, warning of what lay ahead. The breach was opening. The shadows were coming through, and she and Kian stood at the crossroads between worlds, with only an ancient stone and newfound allies to guide them. Section 13. Heart of the Guardian. Howl echoed through the tower's winding stairwell, Vex's unmistakable call that had haunted Elena's dreams since their escape. Kian's hand found hers, squeezing once in silent reassurance as they continued their ascent. The top chamber of the water tower had been transformed. What had once been a utilitarian space now pulsed with sickly light, its walls warped and stretched as if reality itself was being pulled apart. In the center, a vertical tear in the air shimmered, not quite visible, more like the suggestion of a wound in the fabric of existence. Vex stood before it, silver fur rippling with unnatural shadows. 5 of his pack flanked him, their eyes no longer amber but obsidian pools that reflected nothing. At the Alpha's feet lay a crumpled form, russet fur matted with blood. "Lyra!" Elena gasped, recognizing the injured wolf. Vex turned, his muzzle pulling back in a snarl that looked wrong somehow, too wide, too dark. When he spoke, his voice echoed with undertones that weren't his own. "The Heart-Bearer comes," he growled, the words distorted. "How convenient." Nessa stepped forward, her body already shifting, not to wolf but to something elegant and deadly, feathers sprouting along her arms as her features sharpened into a raptor's fierce profile. "Stand down, wolf," she commanded. "You're being used." Vex laughed, the sound fracturing into multiple tones. "Used? I am being elevated." He gestured to the rift behind him. "They showed me the truth your precious heart hides. Shifters weren't created to protect humans. We were meant to rule them, to prepare their world for the true masters." "That's not your voice," Kian challenged, moving to Elena's side. "Not your thoughts. They've corrupted you, Alpha." "Corrupted? Or enlightened?" Vex tilted his head, studying them with those bottomless eyes. "They've shown me power beyond the petty politics of packs, beyond the limitations of flesh." He flexed one paw, now dripping with something that looked like liquid shadow. "Join me, Kian. There's still a place for you, for all wolves willing to embrace their true purpose." Malric stepped forward then, his scarred arm fully exposed, black veins pulsing visibly. "Don't bother, kid," he said to Kian. "I've heard their whispers for 50 years. Once they're in deep enough, reason doesn't work." Vex's gaze shifted to Malric, recognition flaring. "The one who ran," he hissed. "The coward who survived." His head tilted further, unnaturally far. "They remember you. They've been waiting." At that moment, the rift behind Vex widened with a sound like tearing silk. Something began to emerge. Not a physical form so much as a concentration of absence, a void that pulled at the senses. The temperature plummeted. The corrupted wolves howled in unison, the sound distorting into something that scraped against the mind. Elena felt the heart flare in response, its green light suddenly blinding. The stone burned against her palm, but she couldn't release it. It seemed fused to her skin, its pulse synchronized with her racing heartbeat. "Now!" Malric shouted above the cacophony. "Use it now! But how?" Elena looked desperately at the stone, searching for some insight, some instruction. The entities were emerging faster now. Tendrils of shadow reaching through the widening rift, coiling around Vex and his pack, using them as anchors to pull themselves into reality. Kian grabbed her shoulders, turning her to face him. His golden eyes blazed with certainty. "Together," he said, placing his hand over hers around the heart. "That's what the Keeper meant. The bond between us, between human and shifter, that's the key." The moment his skin touched hers, the heart's light changed, deepening, expanding. Images flooded Elena's mind. Ancient guardians standing together against the first invasion. Humans and shifters linked not just by purpose, but by deeper connection, by love and trust that transcended their differences. She understood suddenly. The heart wasn't just a repository of knowledge or a tool for sealing rifts. It was a conduit, a channel through which the power of that primal bond could flow. "Everyone," she called out. "Form the circle." Daniel understood first, his historian's knowledge recognizing the ancient pattern. He grabbed the hand of the nearest shifter who linked with another human. One by one, the Alliance members formed a ring around Elena and Kian. Human and shifter alternating, creating a living chain. Only Malric remained apart, watching with those haunted amber eyes. "Join us," Elena urged him. He shook his head, a sad smile twisting his features. "I can't. I'm marked, remember? But I can give you time." Before she could stop him, he turned and charged toward Vex and the widening rift, his scarred arm extended before him like a weapon. The corrupted Alpha met him with savage fury. They collided in a blur of claws and shadow, buying precious seconds as the circle completed around Elena and Kian. The heart blazed brighter still, its light forming a dome over the joined hands of human and shifter allies. Elena felt power coursing through her, not just her own determination, but the collective will of everyone in the circle. Their shared purpose, their refusal to let the shadows consume their world. Kian's hand tightened over hers. "Now," he whispered. "Let it flow through us." Elena closed her eyes and focused on everything that had brought them to this moment. The trust that had formed when she found him injured on that mountain road. The connection that had grown despite every reason for fear and suspicion. The choice they had made to believe in each other when all logic argued against it. The heart responded. Green light erupted from between their joined hands, shooting upward in a column that struck the rift directly. The tear in reality shuddered, its edges beginning to knit together as the entities shrieked in rage and resistance. "It's working!" Daniel shouted above the chaos, but Vex wasn't finished. Breaking away from his battle with Malric, the corrupted Alpha hurled himself toward Elena and Kian, claws extended, shadows trailing from his form. "The bond must not reform," he howled, his voice barely his own anymore. Lyra's broken form suddenly stirred. With what must have been her last strength, the russet wolf lunged upward, catching Vex's hind leg in her jaws. The Alpha stumbled, his momentum broken just long enough for Nessa, now fully shifted into a magnificent hawk-like form, to intercept him mid-air. The battle between them was brief, but vicious. Feather and fur, talon and fang. They tore at each other while the rift continued to close under the heart's relentless light. Elena felt something building within the stone, a final surge of power gathering like a wave. She met Kian's eyes across their joined hands and saw in them the same realization. "Everyone down," she shouted. "It's going to release." The Alliance members dropped to the floor, maintaining their circle even as they shielded themselves. Only Malric remained standing, limping now toward Lyra's fallen form, placing himself between her and the chaos. The heart pulsed once, twice, then released a shockwave of green-gold light that expanded outward in all directions. Where it touched shadow, the darkness burned away. Where it touched corrupted flesh, the blackness was purged. Where it touched the rift, reality sealed shut with a sound like thunder. For one breathtaking moment, the entire tower was illuminated from within by that ancient light, pure, cleansing, restoring order to chaos. Elena felt rather than saw the entities retreat, forced back into the spaces between as the barrier between worlds strengthened once more. Then silence fell. Slowly, cautiously, the Alliance members rose to their feet. The air in the chamber had cleared, reality solidifying around them once more. Of the rift, nothing remained but a faint shimmer in the air that was already fading. Vex lay unconscious. His wolf form returned to normal, the shadows purged from his system. Around him, his pack members were similarly restored, their eyes no longer pools of darkness. "Is it over?" Elena asked, her voice hoarse from exertion. Daniel moved carefully to examine the space where the rift had been, instruments in hand. "The breach is sealed," he confirmed. "The entities have been pushed back." Kian's arms came around Elena then, pulling her against his chest in an embrace that spoke volumes more than words could express. She leaned into his warmth, the heart still clasped between their joined hands, its light now soft and steady. Lyra, Kian suddenly remembered, pulling away to search for his packmate. They found her where Malric knelt beside her broken form. The scarred shifter's hands rested on her russet fur, his expression unreadable. "She's alive," he said without looking up. "Barely. She fought him, fought the corruption when the rest of the pack surrendered to it." A strange respect tinged his voice. "Brave little wolf." Nessa, returned to human form and hastily wrapped in a coat provided by Daniel, approached to examine Lyra. "She can be healed," she pronounced after a moment. "The Grove's power through the heart has already begun the work. But she'll need time." Elena felt a wave of relief. Despite their complicated history, she had come to respect the female shifter who had chosen truth over loyalty, who had stood alone against her own pack to help them escape. "And Vex?" Kian asked, his voice tightly controlled as he looked at his fallen alpha. "Purged, but not necessarily changed," Daniel said carefully. The entities amplified what was already there, his beliefs, his prejudices. The heart removed their influence but cannot rewrite his nature. "Then we'll deal with him when he wakes," Kian said grimly. "The pack deserves better leadership." A groan from across the chamber drew their attention. Malric was on his knees, clutching his scarred arm, which now glowed with green light where before there had been only shadow. Elena rushed to him, kneeling beside the grizzled shifter. "What's happening?" He looked up at her with wonder in his amber eyes. "It's leaving," he managed between clenched teeth. "The heart's light is burning it out." Before their eyes, the black veins that had marked him for decades began to fade, replaced by thin lines of gold, like the threads within the heart itself. Malric's face contorted in pain that gradually eased into something like peace. 50 years, he whispered. 50 years carrying their taint. And now, he flexed his hand, staring at it as if seeing it for the first time. "Now I'm just me again." The realization of what had happened spread through the group. The heart hadn't just sealed the rift, it had healed the corruption wherever it touched, restored balance, renewed the ancient protection that had once shielded their world. In the days that followed, the full significance of what they had accomplished unfolded. The Alliance networks reported similar events across the country, rifts closing, corrupted individuals returning to normal, the sense of wrongness lifting from places where it had grown strongest. The cycle had been interrupted, not ended, for the entities would always seek entry, but pushed back more thoroughly than in generations. 1 month later, Elena stood on the shore of Lake Michigan, watching the sun set over waters turned to molten gold. The heart of Fenrir rested against her chest on a simple cord, its power dormant for now but ever present, a reminder of the responsibility she had accepted. Footsteps approached on the sand behind her, familiar now, beloved. Kian's arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder as they watched the horizon together. "The council meeting went well," he said quietly. "Nessa is organizing representatives from all the major enclaves. Even some of the traditionally isolated packs have agreed to send delegates. Elena leaned back against his solid warmth. And Vex? Recovering but changed. The challenge for leadership is scheduled for the next full moon. His voice carried a note of determination she had come to recognize. I'll be there, to take your place as Alpha. He turned her gently to face him, golden eyes serious in the fading light. To ensure whoever leads understands the truth, that we were never meant to stand apart from humans, that our strength comes from the bond between our kinds. The past month had been one of remarkable transitions. While the world at large continued unaware of the battle that had been fought, profound changes were occurring in the hidden communities of shifters and their human allies. Ancient knowledge was being rediscovered. New alliances were forming. The Chicago enclave had nearly doubled in size as word spread of what had happened at the water tower. Lyra had recovered, though she still moved with a slight limp that might never fully heal. To everyone's surprise, she had formed an unlikely friendship with Malrique, the two survivors finding common ground in their experiences of standing against their own kind when necessary. Daniel thinks there are more hearts out there, Elena said, her fingers touching the stone that had changed her life. Not just Fenrir and Aegir, but others waiting to be awakened when needed. And more keepers guarding ancient groves, Kian added. More sanctuaries where the barriers between worlds were strengthened generations ago. They had spent hours poring over the Alliance's records, combining that knowledge with what the heart had shown them. The picture that emerged was one of a vast, hidden history, of cycles of threat and defense playing out across millennia, of guardians rising when needed, of bonds formed and broken and formed again. Do you ever wish you could go back? Kian asked softly. To your life before? Before wolves and ancient entities and rifts between worlds? Elena considered the question seriously, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. Her old life seemed impossibly distant now, the quiet routine, the predictable challenges, the comforting illusion that the world was exactly as it appeared. No, she said finally, turning to face him fully. This is where I belong. Where we belong. The truth of those words resonated between them, a certainty that transcended rational explanation. From that first moment on a rain-soaked mountain road, some deeper recognition had drawn them together. The heart had merely confirmed what they had already begun to discover. Kian's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew he possessed. The old stories speak of special bonds between shifters and humans, he said quietly. Partnerships that went beyond alliance, beyond friendship. Connections that the entities could never corrupt because they could never understand them. Love, Elena said simply, naming what had been growing between them since the beginning. His smile was immediate, transforming his serious features. Yes, love, the most ancient magic of all. When he kissed her, the heart warmed between them, not with the urgent pulse of danger, but with the steady glow of recognition, of rightness, of belonging. They stood there as twilight deepened into true night, the first stars appearing overhead. Behind them, Chicago's lights created a different constellation, a testament to human ingenuity. Before them, the lake stretched dark and primordial, a reminder of nature's enduring power. And between those worlds, as they had always been meant to be, stood the guardians, human and shifter, bound by choice and heart, watching over the delicate balance that sustained all life. The cycle would turn again someday. The entities would find new ways to test the barriers, but they would face not isolated pockets of resistance, but a renewed alliance. Humans with their creativity and adaptability, shifters with their primal connection to the Earth's deepest currents, and binding them together something the shadows could never truly comprehend. The capacity to choose each other, again and again, despite all difference. Elena's fingers intertwined with Kian's, the heart pulsing gently between their joined hands. The future stretched before them, uncertain in its details but clear in its purpose. Whatever came next, they would face it together, guardian and protector, human and wolf, Two halves of an ancient whole finally reunited. Home, at last, in each other's arms. He turned her gently to face him, golden eyes serious in the fading light. To ensure whoever leads understands the truth, that we were never meant to stand apart from humans, that our strength comes from the bond between our kinds. The past month had been one of remarkable transitions. While the world at large continued unaware of the battle that had been fought, profound changes were occurring in the hidden communities of shifters and their human allies. Ancient knowledge was being rediscovered. New alliances were forming. The Chicago enclave had nearly doubled in size as word spread of what had happened at the water tower. Lyra had recovered, though she still moved with a slight limp that might never fully heal. To everyone's surprise, she had formed an unlikely friendship with Malrique, the two survivors finding common ground in their experiences of standing against their own kind when necessary. "Daniel thinks there are more hearts out there," Elena said, her fingers touching the stone that had changed her life. "Not just Fenrir and Aegir, but others waiting to be awakened when needed. And more keepers guarding ancient groves," Kian added. "More sanctuaries where the barriers between worlds were strengthened generations ago." They had spent hours poring over the Alliance's records, combining that knowledge with what the heart had shown them. The picture that emerged was one of a vast, hidden history, of cycles of threat and defense playing out across millennia, of guardians rising when needed, of bonds formed and broken and formed again. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" Kian asked softly. "To your life before? Before wolves and ancient entities and rifts between worlds?" Elena considered the question seriously, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. Her old life seemed impossibly distant now, the quiet routine, the predictable challenges, the comforting illusion that the world was exactly as it appeared. "No," she said finally, turning to face him fully. "This is where I belong." "Where we belong." The truth of those words resonated between them, a certainty that transcended rational explanation. From that first moment on a rain-soaked mountain road, some deeper recognition had drawn them together. The heart had merely confirmed what they had already begun to discover. Kian's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew he possessed. "The old stories speak of special bonds between shifters and humans," he said quietly. "Partnerships that went beyond alliance, beyond friendship. Connections that the entities could never corrupt because they could never understand them." "Love," Elena said simply, naming what had been growing between them since the beginning. His smile was immediate, transforming his serious features. "Yes, love. The most ancient magic of all." When he kissed her, the heart warmed between them, not with the urgent pulse of danger, but with the steady glow of recognition, of rightness, of belonging. They stood there as twilight deepened into true night, the first stars appearing overhead. Behind them, Chicago's lights created a different constellation, a testament to human ingenuity. Before them, the lake stretched dark and primordial, a reminder of nature's enduring power. And between those worlds, as they had always been meant to be, stood the guardians, human and shifter, bound by choice and heart, watching over the delicate balance that sustained all life. The cycle would turn again someday. The entities would find new ways to test the barriers, but they would face not isolated pockets of resistance, but a renewed alliance. Humans with their creativity and adaptability, shifters with their primal connection to the Earth's deepest currents, and binding them together something the shadows could never truly comprehend. The capacity to choose each other, again and again, despite all difference. Elena's fingers intertwined with Kian's, the heart pulsing gently between their joined hands. The future stretched before them, uncertain in its details but clear in its purpose. Whatever came next, they would face it together, guardian and protector, human and wolf, two halves of an ancient whole finally reunited, home at last in each other's arms. The storm barreled down the mountain like it had a vendetta, Rain lashed the windshield so hard Elena Carter could barely see 10 feet ahead, her wipers smearing instead of clearing. The narrow road climbed steep and twisting, a thread of asphalt carved into cliffs on one side and endless pines on the other. The old subcompact car rattled and groaned, threatening to stall at every incline. She clenched the steering wheel tighter. She'd promised herself she wouldn't look back. No Portland loft, no toxic ex, no polite smiles from people who only wanted gossip. Just her, a mountain cabin, and hopefully the silence to sew her ripped-apart pieces back together. But her mind replayed his voice anyway. No one will ever want you. You're broken, Elena. You'll always be broken. Her throat burned. She blinked at the rain-washed road, jaw tightening. He was wrong. Even if she had to spend the rest of her life proving it alone, she would. Then movement cut across her headlights. At first, she thought it was a fallen log. But then it moved again. Enormous. Four-legged. Her heart dropped. Shit. She slammed the brakes. The car fishtailed on slick asphalt. Tires squealed against rain and gravel. For a dizzy moment, she thought she'd go over the cliff. The car lurched sideways and slammed nose first into the uphill slope, jolting her teeth. She came to a stop, chest heaving, and then she saw it. A wolf. Not the lean, half-starved kind she'd seen in documentaries. This was bigger, too big. Its shoulders rolled higher than the hood of her car. Its fur was as black as midnight, soaked and clinging to thick muscle. Lightning threw the details into harsh clarity. Fangs glinted white, breath steaming even in the warm storm air, and its eyes. Amber threaded with silver, locking onto her with uncanny intelligence. The instant they met hers, something inside her chest coiled tight, like a thread jerked taut between them. Her breath caught. Shock crackled down her spine, pulling her forward when she should have been frozen in terror. The wolf staggered. That was when she saw the blood, dark ribbons striping its flank, pooling fast and thin in the rain. A bolt, black-fletched, jutted from just behind its shoulder. The great beast tried to take a step closer, but collapsed, breath forced out of him in a low, guttural groan. Elena threw her door open. Storm air slapped her face sideways, cold needles of rain immediately soaking her jeans. Every cell in her brain screamed, "Don't do this." But her body was already moving. Her boots splashed through puddles as she rushed toward the fallen wolf. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it over the storm. She told herself she was insane. She told herself she'd regret it. But she couldn't stop. He lay on his side, chest heaving. Rain poured over his gleaming fur, mixing with crimson that pooled and spiraled from the wound. Elena dropped to her knees in the mud. Her trembling hand reached out almost of its own will and froze an inch from his coat. The wolf's golden eye slid open again. That gaze pinned her in place, not with animal ferocity, but with a depth that made her chest ache. For the flash of an instant, illuminated by lightning, she swore she didn't see a beast at all. She saw a man's face, bloodied, jaw set, lips moving as though he mouthed her name. Her pulse skipped. She blinked. Only the wolf remained. "You're going to die out here," she whispered, voice swallowed instantly by thunder. "And I can't just leave you." The wolf's ear flicked. A low rumble stirred in his chest, not a growl, but something that sounded almost like understanding. Another sound cracked the storm, a howl. Not his. It rose sharp and eerie from the tree line above the road. Then another answered it, deeper from farther west. Then another, closer. A chorus of voices rolling across the ridges. Elena's blood turned to ice. Pack! The wolf stirred weakly, as though the sound was both threat and torment. His head lifted a fraction, ears straining toward the forest. Then his eyes slid to her again, expression raw, feral, pleading, warning. Her pulse hammered in her throat. She should run. She should drive until the tank ran dry, but instead, she pressed her hand flat into the thick, wet fur by his ribs. She felt the tremor of his labored breathing, the wild drum of a heart that should have been too strong to falter. "I'll help you," she said, fierce despite the shake in her voice. "I don't know how, but I won't let them finish you." Lightning split the sky in a jagged scar, and when the thunder chased it down, she swore the storm carried a promise with it. a vow made in golden eyes that should never have met hers. And as the rain fell heavier and the howls answered one another, the truth struck her like cold steel. The night hadn't just delivered a wounded wolf to her path, it had delivered her fate. Elena had never carried anything so heavy in her life. Yet somehow she managed to drag the wolf's massive body from the mud into the cabin. Every inch of effort left her gasping, her shoulders screaming, but adrenaline, and something far stranger, drove her forward. She couldn't explain why she risked everything for him, only that leaving him behind hadn't felt like an option. Her breath wheezed as she finally lowered him onto the braided rug before the cold fireplace. "You'd better be worth it," she muttered, mud streaking her jeans and blood smearing her hands. "Because I just committed breaking and entering doggy style." The joke came out in a cracked whisper, half delirious with fear, but she couldn't stop herself. Talking steadied her. He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. But his golden eyes tracked her as if he understood every word. Rain hammered the roof. Distant howls laced the storm again, sharper now, closer. Elena flinched, forcing herself to believe the thick walls of the cabin could keep them safe. Whoever, or whatever, was out there had sounded too organized, too many voices weaving together in hungry harmony. Wolves weren't supposed to sound like that. Packs belonged in books and legends, not mountainsides outside her aunt's cabin. And yet, focus, Elena. Her gaze dropped to the wound. The broken shaft protruded dark against fur slicked to his ribs. Each shallow rise and fall of his chest made more blood well around it. Instinct clawed at her. She couldn't leave it in. The wilderness class she'd taken years ago came back in flashes. Splinters in flesh meant infection. Sharp steel needed removing. And if this creature had any chance of surviving, her hands trembled as she reached out. "If you bite me, I'm going to be really pissed," she muttered, fingers brushing damp fur. The wolf's body went rigid. His gaze held hers, unblinking. A warning or permission? She couldn't tell. Lightning split the sky outside, the flickering light pouring in through broken glass. And in that brief strobe, Elena swore again that she didn't see a wolf at all. She saw a man's silhouette stretched across the rug. Muscles, scars, blood, eyes still the same gold. Her breath faltered. When the light faded, only the wolf remained. "All right," she whispered. "On 3, she lied. She pulled on 1. The shaft slid free with a sickening wet sound. The wolf roared, a sound so raw it cracked into something more human than animal. His massive frame shuddered, then went still. For a moment, Elena was sure she'd killed him. Her heart slammed hard against her ribs. She pressed trembling hands and gauze to the wound, begging under her breath. And then the impossible began. The air thickened with weight, like static before a storm. Heat pulsed from his body in rolling waves, impossible in the freezing cabin. His bones contorted under his fur with sickening cracks, his spine straightening, forelimbs elongating, jaws reshaping. Fur melted into skin, snout into cheekbones, claws into hands. Elena backed hard into the arm of the sofa, eyes gone wide, breath strangled in her throat. The wolf wasn't a wolf anymore, not entirely. Not at all. A man sprawled on the rug where the beast had fallen. Tall, broad-shouldered, his chest heaving with labored breaths. Blood glossed his side where her gauze now looked pitiful against the wound. Long black hair clung in damp waves around his temples, plastered to sharp cheekbones. His skin was marked with old scars, slashes, bites, burns, that mapped a history she couldn't imagine. But the eyes, they were unchanged. Gold-threaded with silver, the same that had anchored her in the storm. Elena's lungs refused to work. She tried to speak, but nothing came, only a wheeze, until finally, "What the hell are you?" The man's lips curved, bitter and exhausted. His voice was deep, rough, as though unused for a lifetime. "Not your enemy. Not yet." That wasn't an answer. He struggled, muscles tensing to sit upright. Every movement ripped blood fresh along his ribs. She bolted forward before she could think, pressing him down. "Don't you dare!" she snapped, surprising herself with the sharpness of her tone. "You'll bleed out in minutes if you keep moving." For a moment, silence. Only the drum of rain filling the space between them. Then the man's mouth twitched, the barest hint of disbelief at being ordered around in his state. A sound escaped him, not quite a laugh, but close. You don't scare easily. Her skin prickled. Oh, I'm terrified, she admitted, guiding his arm over her lap to keep him steady. Her fingers were slick with his blood. I just don't have the luxury of acting like it. Now shut up before I regret all of this. His eyes fixed on her again with that impossible focus, as if he could cut her open and read her secrets in her heartbeat. You shouldn't have helped me. Maybe I shouldn't have, she whispered, leaning closer to press new bandages against the wound. But I did. For a moment, something unspoken settled between them. Not gratitude, not quite blame, something stranger, thicker, like fate itself had paused to watch. Then, from the storm outside, a chorus of howls rose again, louder, closer. Elena flinched. They're looking for you. His jaw tightened as he forced himself upright despite her steadying hands. No, he said, voice low, commanding, feral. They're looking for us. Because you touched me. Because you carried me here. Her breath iced over. What are you talking about? The man, Wolf, whatever the hell he was, leaned closer, his eyes sparking brighter despite pain. You don't understand. His words were almost a growl. You've marked yourself by helping me tonight. You're part of this now, whether you want it or not. Thunder bellowed across the ridge. The cabin walls trembled with the sound of approaching footsteps, not human, not even close, padding through mud outside. And Elena Carter realized she wasn't safe. Not from him. Not from whatever was hunting him. Not even from herself. Because she hadn't chosen this. But deep in her bones, she knew this night had chosen her. Section 3. Questions in the Dawn. The storm had broken hours ago, but inside the cabin, the air still felt electric, charged with the kind of tension that prickled skin and whispered of danger. Elena stood rooted by the couch, watching Kian pace the length of the cabin, his bare chest gleaming faintly in the firelight. She couldn't unsee it, his transformation, though her mind kept trying to shove it into the same drawer labeled bad dreams and stress hallucinations. A wolf that had nearly filled the road now moved like a caged storm in the shape of a man. He wasn't just wounded, he was hunted. And now, apparently, so was she. Start over, Elena said, her voice shaky but firm. She crossed her arms, kneading the barrier. You expect me to believe you were, what, a wolf? And now you're, what exactly? A shapeshifter? A monster? He stopped pacing and turned sharply toward her. The fire caught in his eyes, turning them molten, gold threaded with that unnatural silver. It made her stomach flip. I'm not a monster. His words were clipped, heavy with a pride she hadn't expected. I'm wolf and man both, born of a bloodline older than the town you ran from. My kind has lived in these mountains since before your kind built roads through them. Elena swallowed. Part of her wanted to laugh. Wild, hysterical laughter that would insist this was all some kind of storm-drunk fever dream. But the wound in his side bled real blood. The scratches on her arms burned where they'd come into contact with his claws. And those eyes, no human eyes had ever looked like that. You had me carry you through the storm, she whispered, her voice breaking between disbelief and fury. You let me touch you. I pulled that arrow out, and now you're saying, I tied myself to you. That I'm marked somehow? Kian's expression shifted, his jaw tightening. You touched my blood. My blood touched yours. That makes you part of it now. Part of what? Of me. The words hung between them like thunder still echoing in distant valleys. Elena heard her own heartbeat trip and stumble. For half a breath, it was as if the whole world leaned toward him, the fire, the grain of the wooden walls, even the silence. She shook herself and blurted the only defense she knew. I didn't agree to that. I didn't ask. You saved me, Kian interrupted, his voice low. And in my world, there's no undoing that kind of bond. They'll smell it on you, even from miles away. In their eyes, you've chosen me. Her laugh came out brittle. Chosen? I didn't even know your name until 10 minutes ago. I don't know who you are, or what you've done to have an entire pack out there hunting you. Kian's shoulders rose and fell in a slow, controlled breath. When he finally spoke, the anger in his voice was tempered by something wearier. I was one of them. Once. They're Alpha. The word carried weight, the sort of authority that made Elena's skin prickle. What happened? She asked cautiously. For a moment, his gaze seemed to dip inward, shadows passing through it. They chose a different path, one I couldn't follow. Power, control, blood dominance, it corrodes everything. I defied them. And for that, I will always be their enemy. Elena's eyes widened. Then the title of this nightmare began to stitch itself together. My mate is my pack's greatest enemy. Her voice came out quieter than she meant. If they want you dead, then what happens to me? His lips pressed flat. Exactly what I've been telling you. A sharp noise outside shattered the fragile silence. Elena flinched, her body jerking as the cabin's porch boards creaked under new weight. She snapped her gaze toward the window, heartbeat ratcheting into panic. Beyond the glass, a shadow passed between the trees. Too large to be a deer, too deliberate. Kian stiffened instantly, his posture shifting like a predator scenting the air. He turned toward the door, his nostrils flaring. They've already found us. Elena's chest hollowed with sudden fear. The pack? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Another creak, closer. The faint scrape of claws on wood. Elena's throat closed. What do we do? You! Kian growled, stepping in front of her with startling speed. Stay behind me. No matter what happens. Her protest stalled in her throat. This wasn't bravado. This was instinct, the way a wall shields you from a storm. Watching him square his shoulders, Elena had the absurd thought that Kian had shifted even while still in human form. He radiated the same raw dominance. She'd seen when the wolf had looked at her in the storm, like some part of the world instinctively bent around where he stood. The doorknob rattled. Elena bit down on a cry, then a voice, deep, smooth, too calm, called through the storm-dampened wood. Kian. A pause. Come out! Elena held her breath, every muscle strung like a violin string. Kian's eyes had gone pure steel. Who are they? She whispered. He shot her a look over his shoulder, fierce enough to burn her question quiet. Then he faced the door again. Stay away from her, he called back. His voice was a rough snarl wrapped in human words. Soft laughter answered from the porch. Ah, so it's true then. The exile has found himself. Company! Another voice joined the first, this one thicker, crueler. She smells of you already, how inconvenient. Elena's stomach dropped. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't budge. She barely understood what was happening, only that whatever door she had opened, she couldn't close it again. Kian's body went taut, coiled for violence. His wound oozed fresh blood, bandage straining. Still, his voice came steady, deadly. You will not touch her. The wood groaned as though something heavy pressed against it. Elena's hands curled into fists she couldn't unclench. And then, with deliberate slowness, claws dragged down the outside of the door, long, serrated, promising destruction. Elena backed against the wall, her heart pounding, her mind teetering between disbelief and stark terror. Kian, she whispered. He turned his head slightly. Enough for golden eyes to pin her with a promise. Trust me. The growl outside deepened into several answering voices. A chorus that made the cabin's thin walls vibrate with menace. Elena's hand tightened in Kian's, her nails biting into his palm. She didn't think. She just clung as if that one connection could anchor her against the storm gathering beyond the door. They're right there, she whispered. Oh my God, they're right there. Kian's gaze didn't waver from hers. His golden eyes burned, molten and fierce. Then we don't give them the chance to come in. You stay behind me. You don't run, not unless I tell you. Understand? Her head jerked up and down before she'd even considered saying no. A loud creak came from the porch, footsteps, deliberate, testing. Someone, or something, brushed against the window. Elena's heart wanted to explode out of her ribcage. Kian moved fast, silent, his body rippling between graceful man and the barely contained predator beneath his skin. He reached the front door and pressed one scarred hand against it, listening. She caught the faint shift of his nostrils as he drew in a breath. 3 of them, he murmured, too quiet for human ears. They're baiting me. One at the door. 2 circling the back? Elena pressed a hand to her mouth. Then we can't stay here. We'll be trapped! Kian's growl cut her off. He pushed the furniture against the back door with one sharp shove, the chair scraping across wood. They want me outside, and they'll tear this place apart if I don't meet them. I didn't drag you out of the storm to your death. The words escaped harsher than she meant, her panic sharpening into fury. Kian whipped his gaze toward her, and for the briefest second she saw something raw flicker there, something that looked dangerously like gratitude. I don't plan to die. Then softer, almost amused, despite the tension. Not with you here. Before she could demand what that meant, the front door shuddered under a heavy impact. Elena screamed, staggering back. Scratch marks raked down the wood as if testing its strength. They'll break through, she hissed. Kian's voice turned iron. Open it first! What? Are you insane? Trust me. His eyes gleamed with something feral. Let me choose where this fight begins. Every instinct screamed no. Yet in some inexplicable way, she felt her body moving toward the lock, her heart galloping but her hands steady. As if obeying a command embedded deeper than fear. The metal clicked. Kian tore the door open with a speed that blurred his shape, then moved with lethal intent. It happened too fast for Elena to process. 1 second a half-dressed man, the next, the midnight-furred wolf bursting outward beneath the storm's lingering rain. The porch lit up with snarls and flashes of teeth. Elena's breath caught in her throat as massive shapes lunged into the clearing. Wolves nearly as large as Kian's form, their eyes glinting the same supernatural gold. The sound of their collision shook the night. Elena barely registered her own feet moving until she found herself standing just inside the doorway, seeing more than she wanted but unable to look away. Kian hit the first attacker so hard they crashed into the railing, snapping wood. His snarl was furious, protective. Another wolf cut around, teeth gleaming, headed straight for the open doorway. Straight for her. Elena screamed and threw up her hands. She had no weapon, no chance, but Kian was faster. He launched himself past the first wolf, colliding with the second mid-leap. They tumbled into the wet dirt, a tangle of fur, claws, and snapping jaws. The third wolf, a gray one with scars across its muzzle, snarled at Elena where she stood frozen. Its eyes locked on hers with chilling intelligence. This one didn't rush. It stalked forward, low and deliberate, testing her fear. Elena! Kian's voice ripped through the storm. Not a growl now, but words, unmistakably clear even in wolf shape. Get back inside. For a heartbeat, she couldn't move. Her whole body was ice, her mind refusing the reality unraveling before her. Wolves didn't speak. Wolves didn't. The gray charged. Her survival instincts finally obeyed. Elena scrambled backward, slamming the door shut just as the scarred wolf crashed into it. Wood splintered. Hinges screamed, Kian! She shrieked. Outside, the battle raged, heavy thuds reverberating through the ground as the wolves clashed. Snarls, yelps, the splintering of wood, sounds of violence so raw her stomach turned. She grabbed the nearest thing that might work as a weapon, a fireplace poker, and clutched it like a lifeline. Crouching against the wall. Please, please, she whispered, praying to anyone listening that Kian would win. Minutes felt like hours. Then as sudden as it began, silence fell. Silence, except for ragged panting just beyond the door. The knob turned. Elena gasped. Poker raised, but there was no way. None of them should have the sense to. The door opened, slow and deliberate. And there he was. Kian, human again. Shirt torn, blood streaking his chest. One arm half hanging at his side, but his eyes still burning bright. They're gone, he rasped. His voice was hoarse, but steady. Elena's arms went limp. The poker clattered to the floor. She stared at him, at the trail of blood sliding down his jaw, and couldn't tell where his ended and her nightmares began. He staggered once, caught himself against the wall. Then he looked at her, really looked, and his next words coiled around her like chains. You're not safe anymore, Kian said. Not with me, not without me. The forest pressed in closer with every step. Pines loomed like sentinels, their dripping branches whispering in the chill air. Elena's breath came ragged now, her lungs burned. but she forced herself to match Kian's long strides. He seemed to move effortlessly despite his wound, like the mountains themselves bent around his will. Her boots slipped on slick leaves, but each time she stumbled, his hand shot back, steadying her. Not gently. His grip was firm, almost desperate, as though he couldn't risk losing her for a second. "Not far now," he murmured, eyes darting between shadows. "Half a mile to the ridge." "Half a mile?" Elena managed between gasps. "Are you sure you don't want to carry me?" His jaw twitched, the faint outline of amusement cracking his grim composure. "If I shift now, I bleed out before we reach it." "You'll have to keep up." Elena groaned, but pushed harder, teeth gritted against fatigue. Then the wind shifted. Kian froze mid-stride, one hand snapping up to halt her like iron shutting a door. His nostrils flared, every line of his body suddenly wired with tension. "They found our blood trail," he whispered. "They're close!" As if answering him, a howl lanced the silence, reverberating through her chest like a war drum. The sound was different than the others, darker, more commanding. Elena's pulse faltered. "That's him, isn't it?" Kian's golden eyes gleamed under the filtered daylight, hard as flint. "Vex!" A second howl rose, layered over the first. Then another. Soon it was a chorus, hunting calls rolling like thunder off the ridge. Kian grabbed her hand again, yanking her off the trail into denser underbrush. Branches whipped at her jacket, snagged her hair, but she didn't let go. Roots caught her boots, rocks shifted underfoot, but she stayed right on his heels, her instincts screaming that if she lost him, she was done. They broke through into a shallow gully, damp earth crumbling beneath their weight as they slid down into the hollow. Kian pressed a finger to his lips, urging silence. Above them, the howls cut off abruptly. The forest fell eerily still, as if holding its breath. Then faintly, Elena heard the crunch of footsteps again. Not animal padding, but deliberate human movement. "Wait," she whispered, panic giving her voice a sharp edge. "Why would they be in human form? Wouldn't wolves move faster?" "They're not hunting the ridge," Kian answered, his voice low and edged. "They're hunting you. Humans move quieter in the mountains. They want to flush us into the open." Her stomach plummeted. They're here for me?" His face was grim. "You touched my blood, Elena. That bond ties you to me in ways even I can't fully unravel. To the pack, it marks you as mine, and that makes you their enemy." The word mine twisted in her chest, heating blood already choked with adrenaline. She wanted to deny it, wanted to fight the strange thrill that word sparked. But before she could speak, voices rang through the trees above them, not howls. "Men's voices! Fan out! I smell him, bleeding north." "I smell her." A note of cruel fascination clung to the words. "Sweet little human." "She's close." Every hair on Elena's arms lifted. She clamped her hand over her mouth to keep herself from gasping aloud. Kian pressed closer in the shadows, his chest brushing her shoulder, the solid heat of him anchoring her while his voice slid against her ear like gravel. "Stay quiet. Don't move until I say so." She nodded, throat dry. Two men appeared on the ridge above, crouched low, their bodies too graceful, too precise. Even in human form, something animal flickered in them, the glint of amber eyes, shoulders rolling with suppressed strength. One sniffed the air, his head jerking slowly toward their hiding place. Her heart stopped. Kian's hand was suddenly on the knife at his belt, his other arm sliding in front of her protectively. "They know," Elena whispered. Barely audible. "No," Kian hissed softly. "They suspect." Knowing and finding are different things, but then the nearest man bared his teeth in a grin, eyes cutting straight toward them. "Little Alpha," he called out into the shadows. "You think we can't smell the bond on her?" "She reeks of you." Elena bit down a scream. Heat flared against her skin, humiliation and terror mixing as though suddenly the whole forest could smell her blood, her heart, the tether she couldn't sever. Kian's voice rumbled low. "Vex's hounds!" He rose slowly from the hollow, pulling Elena with him, knife glinting in his grip. His posture was protective, but every line in his face screamed danger, like he was holding himself on the edge of unleashing something brutal. The taller of the two shifters laughed. Alpha who can't keep a pack. Hiding with his little human mate like some dog in the dirt. Elena stiffened, but before the insult could fully land, Kian's tone darkened into something primal. She is under my protection. Anyone who touches her will answer in blood. The shifters exchanged amused glances, mocking, as though the wounded wolf before them was no threat. And then, without warning, they lunged. Kian shoved Elena to the ground, twisting as one attacker dropped from the ridge above. His knife flashed, catching the man across the arm, drawing a spray of blood. The second came from behind, and suddenly the hollow filled with snarls, half human, half animal, as claws extended and teeth lengthened. Elena scrambled backward, panic choking her. Her rational brain screamed at her to run, but to where? She would be dead in seconds without Kian. And then impossibly her eyes caught his, bright gold, burning, even as he wrestled to keep both enemies at bay. "Elena!" he shouted, voice reverberating like thunder. "Run to the ridge! Find the keeper!" Her breath caught. Who? The forest will guide you." His words split through the roar of claws and growls. "Go!" Her body refused. She couldn't leave him, wounded, outnumbered. But his eyes held hers, desperate and demanding all at once. Something answered inside her, the same pull she had felt on the road when she'd first touched him, fated, bound, impossible to run from. Except now, that bond might be the only thing that could save either of them. She bolted into the trees. As the sounds of vicious combat echoed behind her, Elena tore through the undergrowth, her heart beat louder than thunder. She didn't know who the keeper was. She didn't know what she was running to, but one truth rose clearer than the storm that had birthed this nightmare. If she didn't find the keeper, Kian was going to die. The cave swallowed them whole, air damp, cool, carrying the scent of mineral and moss. Their footsteps echoed faintly against slick stone as they descended deeper, farther from the faint daylight filtering through the entrance. Elena's lungs worked overtime, the adrenaline from their cliffside escape refusing to ease. Her hand was still in Kian's. She hadn't realized how hard she was gripping him until he finally stopped beside an underground stream and crouched, his golden eyes tracing the water's path along the cavern. She nearly bumped into him, momentum driving her forward. "They'll follow," Elena whispered, voice carrying in the hollow dark. "Wolves don't give up." "They'll follow the scent," he corrected. "But these caves aren't a place they know. The Black Pine Pack avoids them. Old stories say the mountain itself guards secrets here." "Secrets?" she asked cautiously. His gaze flicked to her, unreadable. "Yes, and the one who keeps them." Elena frowned. "The keeper?" He nodded once, as though speaking the name too loudly would summon something they weren't ready for. He knelt, washing blood from his bandaged side. The water turned briefly crimson, then disappeared into darkness. His wound no longer gushed as it had the night before, but it was still angry-looking, raw. "You shouldn't be moving at all," she muttered, kneeling beside him. "You could tear the stitches." "You stitched me with trembling hands in a storm," Kian said, the edge of a low laugh ghosting his voice. "They'll hold. You're stronger than you think." Her cheeks warmed, though she tried to mask it by looking into the water. "That's generous," she said. "I'm just trying not to let you bleed out on my aunt's carpet or the side of a mountain." Kian leaned back against the wall, studying her in the dim light. "You think of others even when it puts you at risk. The pack doesn't understand that kind of instinct. It terrifies them." Something unspoken passed between them, another invisible thread tugging at her ribs, binding her closer to him, despite every ounce of reason protesting. Elena looked away first, heart thundering. "Kian!" She hesitated. "This bond you talked about? Between us. It feels..." Before she could finish, a soft ripple broke across the water's surface. A voice, low, ageless, neither male nor female, whispered, "You've brought trouble to my sanctuary, son of Black Pine." Elena startled, glancing around. They were alone, or had been. But on the far edge of the chamber, where the stream curved into darkness, the shadows thickened. Shapes began to coalesce, robes woven from mist, hair like shimmering silver threads, eyes luminous as moonlight reflected on ice. Kian immediately lowered his head, one hand gripping his knee in what Elena realized was deference. "Keeper!" The figure stepped forward, barefoot, yet gliding rather than walking. Elena felt deeply, instinctively, that this being was other, not shifter, not human, something older than both. The keeper's glowing eyes moved from Kian to Elena, studying every trembling breath she took. "A human," the voice whispered, filled with curiosity. "Carrying his blood? Marked by him?" Elena bristled. She wanted to deny it, to insist she wasn't just marked by anyone, but the way the keeper's gaze pierced into her chest silenced her. "She saved me," Kian said softly, his voice carrying weight in the cavern. "And in saving me, she is now hunted," the keeper tilted their head. "Hunted by Vex?" "Yes. And you still bear the heart." Kian unclasped the leather cord from around his neck and set the green stone carefully upon the cavern floor. It pulsed faintly, as if the stone itself recognized it had entered sacred ground. Elena swallowed. She'd thought it was just a trinket, a carved pebble draped in legend. But now, seeing it thrumming faint light in the cave's silence, she realized it was powerful, ancient, alive in some way she couldn't explain. "Why is it so important?" Elena asked, half whisper, half demand. The keeper's gaze turned fully to her, their voice reverberating with something that made her bones ache. "Because it is truth given form," she frowned. That's not an answer, but Kian, his jaw tight, his posture rigid, already knew what they meant. "You've protected this knowledge for centuries," he said. "But it's time the lies end. Vex uses them to justify his power, to enslave both pack and prey." His voice gained strength, conviction echoing against stone. "If we reveal where shifters truly came from, the packs won't follow him. And you believe they will follow you instead?" the keeper asked. Kian shook his head. "I don't care who they follow, only that they see the truth and break the cycle of blood." The keeper turned back to Elena. "And you, fated human, what do you see when you look upon him?" Elena's mouth went dry. "Fated human?" The phrase wrapped around her like cold chains and warm fire all at once. She should have looked away. She should have cut the cord here, denied whatever pull this was. Instead, she answered quietly, honestly, "Someone worth saving." The cavern seemed to hum in acknowledgement. The heart pulsed once, brighter than before, casting emerald light across the water. The keeper inclined their head, a subtle bow. "The bond stirs already, dangerous, unbreakable if sealed." Elena blinked. "Sealed?" They drifted closer, robes sighing like smoke. "Blood called to blood when you carried him from the storm. Now breath answers breath. The last step seals the fate, soul to soul. To deny it would be agony. To accept is to stand against all others." Kian's expression darkened, but not with disbelief, with recognition. He whispered, almost too low for Elena to hear, "The mate bond." Elena's chest tightened. Mate, not partner, not lover. Mate, a word ancient, primal, terrifying in its certainty. "But she's human," Kian protested, rising to his feet. "No human has survived the sealing of a bond." The keeper gave no comfort. "The choice lies with her. But whether accepted or not, Vex will feel it. He will not stop until he destroys what he cannot claim." They turned from them then, fading toward the dark river's curve as their voice echoed one last warning. "He knows you are here. Choose quickly, shifter, or lose everything." The shadow swallowed the figure, leaving only silence and the faint pulse of the heart on the stone floor. Elena stared at it, then at Kian. Her world tilted, shattering again. "Tell me," she whispered hoarsely. "Is it true? Am I your mate?" Kian met her gaze, his eyes blazing with both longing and dread. His silence was the only answer she needed, and just as fear twisted in her gut, a thunderous roar of claws on stone echoed from the entrance tunnel. The pack had arrived. The chamber trembled as Vex padded in, his massive paws striking stone with a resonance that felt more earthquake than movement. He was extraordinary even among shifters, bigger than any wolf Elena had seen yet, his silver-gray coat threaded with darker streaks, like storm clouds twisting in his fur. His amber eyes glowed with terrifying authority, every inch of him radiating lethal dominance. The wolves flanking him, half a dozen at least, fanned into the chamber's edges, snarling low, their bodies taut with restrained violence. Elena instinctively pressed closer to Kian, while Lyra lowered her gaze, lips curled in a strange mixture of awe and submission. "Brother," Vex's voice rumbled when he finally shifted. Fur collapsed into skin, bone rearranged with smooth horror until a towering man stood in the Alpha's place. Broad-shouldered, scarred along one cheek, his presence was almost more dangerous in human form. A black symbol, a brand almost, marked his chest, 3 intersecting claw marks. Fresh and angry-looking. "I warned you," he said, voice rich with power, every word reverberating through the chamber walls. "The moment you touched the heart, you became an enemy to the pack." "To me?" Kian stepped forward, placing himself firmly between Elena and Vex. Even injured, he held himself with equal authority, his golden gaze unyielding. "No, Vex. By hiding the truth, you made yourself an enemy to everything our ancestors stood for." He swept his arm toward the glowing murals. "This chamber speaks." "Do you deny what countless generations carved into stone with their own hands?" Vex's lips curved in a dark smile. "Truth is not what is written, but what is enforced. You think these old carvings are power. Power is control, Kian, and control belongs to me." Lyra shifted uneasily, her eyes darting between the brothers, though not brothers by blood, Elena realized, but by oath, by pack. Still, there was history in her gaze. She had once admired Kian. She still admired Vex. Her loyalty was fractured, but her fear of the Alpha seemed absolute. "You always envied me," Vex said, circling Kian like a predator sizing up prey. "Even as pups, you wanted what I had. My strength, my command, my place. I wanted justice," Kian shot back. "I wanted truth, and you betrayed both." The two shifters locked eyes in a silent primal challenge that filled the chamber with invisible pressure. Elena's chest tightened, as though unseen forces pressed down on her, demanding submission. Her heart hammered, her knees almost buckling. This wasn't just a stare. It was dominance itself, primal energy radiating outward to force obedience. Kian felt it too. She saw his jaw clench, sweat bead at his temple. But slowly, agonizingly, he straightened his shoulders, refusing to bend. His defiance seemed to ripple in waves, cutting through Vex's oppressive aura and breaking the invisible grip on Elena's chest. She gasped involuntarily, lungs suddenly free again. Vex's eyes narrowed, his smile slipping. Stubborn as always. But stubbornness doesn't make you fit to lead or to live. Around them, the pack growled as one, a chorus of menace. The beating of Elena's pulse matched their rhythm, each sound like a drum in her ears. For the first time, she fully comprehended. There was no reasoning here, no compromise. This chamber would become a battlefield. And then Kian glanced back at her. Just a flicker, a heartbeat. "Stay near me," he murmured, so low only she could hear. "Whatever happens, don't run. If you run, they'll chase." Elena swallowed hard, nodding. Her instincts screamed to bolt. But something deeper, something forged in every moment of this mad night, kept her rooted. Kian had not abandoned her, and she would not abandon him. Vex rolled his neck, letting out a low, eager growl that vibrated through his human chest. So be it. The old laws demand blood when honor is challenged. His gaze slid to Elena, cold and cruel. "Perhaps I'll start with her." "Kill the bond, break your will!" Kian's roar shook the cavern. In a flash, his body shifted, bones snapping, fur sprouting until his wolf form stood tall and fierce. His golden eyes burned in the glow of the ancient murals, twice as wild, twice as alive as the night Elena first saw him. Power hummed off him like heat waves. The pack burst into snarls, wolves crouching low, claws scraping across the stone, and Vex transformed to meet him. The Alpha's wolf was monstrous. Where Kian's form was sleek fury built for speed and precision, Vex was pure brutality. Massive shoulders, jaws broad enough to crush bone in a single bite. His silver eyes caught the golden chamber light and reflected it like molten fire. Two forces of nature stood opposed, sibling wolves, yet mortal enemies. Lyra took a step forward, torn, desperation in her voice. "Vex, wait, don't do this here." "The chamber, it'll—" But her warning was drowned by the sound of two titans colliding. The Alpha battle had begun. Kian struck first, fast as lightning, hurling himself into Vex's chest with brutal force. The impact shook the dais, sending cracks spidering through the black stone. Vex responded instantly, twisting and slamming Kian to the ground. The entire pack howled, the sound deafening in the massive chamber. Elena pressed herself back against the carved wall, heart in her throat, the ancient symbols glowing wildly around her as though reacting to the clash. Light surged down the channels in the dais, pulsing brighter with each strike, each snarl, each drop of blood. The chamber wasn't just ancient stone, it was alive, and it was responding. As Kian and Vex tore into each other, fur and blood mingling under the golden glow, Elena realized with chilling certainty this wasn't just a fight for leadership. This was a fight for the future of every shifter and every human, and somehow, she was already part of it. For several long moments, Elena and Kian simply stood there, surrounded by colossal trees whose branches swayed in a wind that didn't quite touch the ground. The grove exuded a quiet that felt almost sentient, as though the forest itself was listening. The air smelled of petrichor and something subtler, like old stone warmed by sunlight. Elena tightened her grip on the heart of Fenrir. "This place, it doesn't feel real." Kian's golden eyes swept across the towering trunks. "It's real, just hidden. The heart was created to guide its bearer here if danger threatened. This grove is part of the old world. What remains of it?" "Where?" Elena asked, struggling to orient herself. "We can't still be in the Rockies." "We're not," Kian said simply. "We crossed far more than distance." Before Elena could press further, something stirred in the shadows at the grove's center. A figure emerged, a woman cloaked in living moss, her hair cascading like silver strands threaded with leaves. Her skin was ageless, yet weathered like carved wood, her eyes luminous and green as spring growth. When she spoke, her voice layered with the resonance of many others, as though the forest itself lent her its voice. "You have brought the heart home," she intoned, her gaze on Kian. "But you are not its bearer." Elena felt the weight of that gaze shift. It pinned her in place, not harsh but deep, piercing, like sunlight through clear water. For reasons she couldn't explain, she held the stone out, as if in offering. The woman inclined her head in acknowledgement. Yes, for the first time in many generations, a human carries the heart without burning. "The bond has chosen? Chosen?" Elena echoed, her voice trembling. Kian lowered his head slightly, half respectful, half weary. "Keeper," Elena turned to him sharply. "This is her. The person you said we had to find." The keeper circled them slowly, her bare feet making no sound despite the forest floor's carpet of brittle moss. "Long have I waited for the balance to return. But it is not the shifter alone," she said, her voice rising and falling like wind in the trees. "It is the human. Always the human. Forgotten, cast aside, yet essential. Essential." "To what?" Elena asked. Her grip on the heart tightened compulsively. It pulsed against her palm as though echoing the keeper's words. The woman lifted a hand, and the bark of the nearest tree rippled like water. Images formed, moving, living as if captured on glass. Elena saw flashes of battles she half recognized from the holograph in the cave. Humans and shifters fighting together against impossible creatures. But then the images shifted, splintering, shifters turning against humans, seeds of mistrust planted and blooming into centuries of separation. "Your kinds were made to stand together," the keeper said. "Wolf and man, two halves of one defense. Alone, each falters. Together you endure. But the lie of dominance, the hunger for power, fractured what was whole. And now, her luminous eyes sharpened. Now it returns. The forest seemed to darken around them. Distantly, Elena thought she heard something stirring, like growls muffled beneath earth and root. Kian stiffened. The black pine pack? The keeper shook her head gently. Not yet. Worse. She gestured, and the images shifted again. Shadow-like figures, amorphous forms with eyes like burning coals. They poured across landscapes, devouring, twisting, leaving ruin behind. Elena's heart clenched painfully. What are they? The first enemy, the keeper said. The reason your world was saved, the reason shifters were created. Creatures not of this earth, but of elsewhere, drawn to its life, to its abundance. They were banished, sealed, forgotten, but not destroyed. The seal weakens, Kian's jaw tightened. And Vex, he doesn't know this? He knows only what he chooses, the keeper replied. Alphas have been taught to guard fragments of the truth, but arrogance blinds them. They believe humans are the threat. They do not see what returns through the cracks of the old bindings. She turned to Elena. But the heart chose you. That means the choice is no longer theirs. Elena felt suddenly very small. Just yesterday, her biggest concern had been surviving a storm after a car accident. Now she was standing in a living myth, holding a key to humanity's survival or destruction. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice breaking. The keeper leaned close. Her eyes were ancient forests, her breath the scent of pine and loam. To remember. To remind, to stand. You are not shifter, yet you are bridge. The heart answers intention, not bloodline. Teach the wolves that strength is not conquest, and teach your kind that not all beasts wear fur. Elena swallowed hard. And if I fail? The keeper's luminous smile was both kind and devastatingly sad. Then both kinds fall, and the first enemy feeds. Kian stepped closer to Elena, his presence a solid anchor amid the whirlwind of revelation. She won't fail, he said firmly. His hand brushed hers, grounding her. Because I won't let her stand alone. The keeper's gaze softened, and for the first time a faint smile touched her lips. Then perhaps there is hope. But you must move quickly. The alpha hunts still, and stronger prey circles beyond. The grove is sanctuary only for the bearer. Your enemies will not hesitate to wait outside its borders. Elena glanced at Kian, the weight of the heart pressing against her palm like a living heartbeat. It no longer felt like a relic. It felt like responsibility. What do we do now? She asked. The keeper lifted her arms. Branches above them groaned and shifted, lowering something Elena hadn't noticed before. A woven crown of twigs and golden threads. It floated gently down until it hovered before her chest. Now, the keeper said quietly, you choose. Do you carry the burden forward into shadow and fire, or do you leave it here and let the end come as it will? The grove stilled, holding its breath. Kian's golden eyes burned into hers, equal parts fear and faith. And Elena realized this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about becoming something none of them had been for centuries. It was about becoming a symbol. When Elena woke again, the grove was drenched in dawnlight, though she suspected the sun's rhythms here followed no ordinary arc. The golden glow that streamed through the vast canopy seemed purposeful, as if the ancient trees themselves had chosen to signal a beginning. Kian was already awake, crouched near the edge of the clearing. He looked wholly restored, strong, sharp, his lean frame alert in a way that made him seem part of this place. But what caught Elena's attention was the absence of the keeper. Her dwelling, the strange structure of woven wood and light, stood silent and dark now, its windows extinguished, as if it had retreated into the grove's roots when her role was done. Kian turned at the sound of Elena stirring. His golden eyes softened. She's gone, he said, just as she promised. It's our road now. Elena pushed herself up, wincing at the remnants of stiffness in her legs. To her surprise, the ache eased quickly, as if the grove itself refused to let fatigue linger. Do you think we'll ever see her again? Kian ran a hand through his dark hair, his jaw tightening a little. If we survive what's coming, maybe. But she wasn't exaggerating. Keepers appear when they're needed. and vanish until the cycle turns again. They fell into silence. Elena's gaze dropped to the heart of Fenrir, lying nestled in her palm where she'd fallen asleep, still clutching it. The green stone felt heavier now, less a burden of weight than of responsibility. Its slow, steady pulse had changed since last night. Where once it had felt like a companion, now it emanated expectation. Direction. It wants to move, she said softly, almost to herself. Kian nodded. It's calling. The question is, where? As if the heart had heard him, the glow in its golden threads intensified, briefly projecting a faint shimmer onto the moss. Lines appeared like veins of light forming a crude map. Elena squinted, trying to make sense of it, until she realized it wasn't showing geography as humans understood it. It was showing energy, a network of connections, bright nodes where currents met, dim tributaries threading between. One node pulsed more strongly than the others, like a heartbeat within the web. There, Kian said, leaning closer beside her. He tapped the glowing map without touching it, careful as though afraid his presence might distort it. That's the first stop. But Elena frowned. The shape surrounding that node was unmistakable, an outline she had driven across hundreds of times in her life. That's the Great Lakes, she whispered, tracing the contours of Michigan's mitten shape with her finger. The strongest pulse is near the southern shore. Chicago, maybe. Or somewhere inland, Kian exhaled slowly. Makes sense. Cities sit on old power grounds. Humans build where energy was always strong, even if most of them forgot why. He met her gaze. If the heart is pointing us there, then someone, human or shifter, has already been drawn to that node. An ally. Or a threat. Elena's mouth went dry at the thought of plunging back into the ordinary world with extraordinary enemies nipping at their heels. Vex, the pack. And if the Keeper's story was true, possibly something far worse lurking just beyond the veil of reality. Going back? She hesitated. What if time really does flow differently here? For all we know, it's been weeks, months. Kian's expression softened. Then we'll deal with what we find. But we can't stay here. Whatever protection the grove offers, it wasn't meant to shield us forever. The Keeper passed the torch. Now we carry it. He rose and extended his hand. Elena took it automatically, steadying herself as he helped her to her feet. Their joined palms lingered, the electric resonance between them unmistakable. For an instant, Elena let herself imagine it, what it might feel like to stay here in safety, away from the storm outside. But deep down she already knew. That storm was why she was here. Why the heart had accepted her at all. Okay, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Let's find this ally. The grove did not open the same kind of shimmering portal as before. Instead, the path lit once more, narrowing into an arch between two impossibly vast trees. Their branches intertwined overhead, forming a natural gateway glowing with thin strands of gold. The heart seemed to tug toward it, the threads in its core flashing brighter with every step. Elena and Kian passed through side by side. The sensation this time was gentler, no sense of being pulled apart, but rather of being guided through a current already waiting for them. Colors warped, sound muffled, until suddenly the ground beneath their boots turned from velvet moss to damp earth. They stumbled out into the scent of pine sap and gasoline, of cigarettes and wet asphalt. The contrast was jarring. Elena blinked hard, trying to adjust from impossible radiance to the grimy twilight of a human rest stop off a lonely highway. Neon buzzed overhead from a flickering diner sign. An empty parking lot stretched around them, dotted with a few battered trucks and a soda machine that hummed like it resented still being alive. Somewhere close, the low thunder of semi-trucks rumbled down an interstate. We're back, Elena whispered. The real world. Or close enough, Kian murmured. His eyes narrowed slightly, all senses on alert. But do you feel it? At first, Elena only felt the ordinary weirdness of being hurled from a magical grove into Middle America. But then, yes, a thrum beneath her skin, the same vibration she'd felt in the grove, but warped somehow, sharper, uneasy. The node, she realized with a shudder. It's near here. She glanced toward the flickering glow of the gas station pumps. But so is something else. The smell hit her next, faint but distinct. Musk and iron, the scent of wolf. Kian had already shifted his stance, half-crouched, his jaw tightening. "The pack," he growled under his breath. "They've found the trail already." But before Elena could reply, the heart flared in her palm. The green light shot outward in a sudden arc, illuminating a hunched figure sitting at the edge of the diner's neon glow. It wasn't Vex. It wasn't even a wolf. It was a man, middle-aged, scruffy, with layers of coats that looked thrifted from 10 different decades. His eyes, however, gleamed like polished amber, too bright, too sharp. He squinted at the heart in Elena's hand and grinned, showing teeth just a little too long. "Well," he said in a gravelly voice, hauling himself to his feet. "About damn time. Thought I was going mad waiting for one of you to bring it here." Elena froze, her pulse hammering. Kian's hand brushed the knife at his belt. "Who are you?" Kian demanded. The man stepped forward, raising his palms as if in peace, though his grin remained unsettling. "Name's Malric. Been a long time since I called myself part of a pack. Longer still since I trusted one." His gaze flicked from Kian to Elena, then lingered on the heart. "But I know what that is. And I know what comes crawling when it wakes up." Elena felt the stone pulsing harder in her hand, almost vibrating toward him, as if recognizing some echo within him. Kian's eyes narrowed further. "And why should we trust you?" Malric's grin dimmed slightly, replaced by something darker, more haunted. "Because I'm the one who survived the last time the shadows came through." Silence fell like a stone between them. Elena tightened her grip on the heart, every hair on her body standing on end. The cycle, she realized, wasn't just beginning, it had begun already. For a long moment, the only sounds were the lazy buzz of the diner's neon sign and the groan of 18-wheelers on the distant highway. Elena clutched the heart so tightly her fingers ached, its living pulse hammering into her palm as if echoing her own. Malric stayed where he was, one boot balanced on the crumbling curb, the neon light flickering over his weathered face. He no longer grinned. His eyes had dulled to something older, more tired. "I saw it the last time," he said finally, his voice low and rough, like gravel sliding down metal. 50 years back, long before your pack was tearing itself apart over purity and politics." His gaze slid to Kian. "Long before you were even born." "You expect us to believe you were fighting shadows half a century ago?" Kian's voice carried steel, but Elena heard the underlying note of wariness. "You don't look old enough." Malric gave a humorless laugh. "That's because the Grove isn't the only sanctuary. When the last cycle began, I was chosen, like you two apparently have been. The Keepers sheltered a handful of us, taught us enough to stop the breach from going fully open. Took everything we had. Most didn't come back." Elena swallowed hard. "And you did." "I ran." The bluntness of the admission startled her. His amber eyes flicked up, meeting hers without flinching. "I was the only coward who slipped away when the barrier snapped shut on the last incursion. Everyone else either died fighting or—" His gaze darkened further. "Or burned themselves out sealing the rift." The words hung heavy between them. Kian's jaw clenched. "If that's true, then you hid while others bled for both humans and shifters. Why should we trust anything you say?" Something in Malric's weary expression cracked then. "Because hiding didn't save me." Slowly, he slid one sleeve up, revealing a lattice of black scars that spiderwebbed across his arm, glowing faintly even under the neon. They looked alive, like veins filled with shadow. "It marked me when I ran. I've been carrying this sickness inside me for 5 decades. I've got one foot in their hell world already. That's what surviving looks like." Elena sucked in a sharp breath. The scars pulsed as if they were breathing. The heart in her hand answered with an angry flare of green-gold light. Malric winced and tugged the sleeve back down. "Haven't been able to get within 10 miles of one of the heartstones without it lighting me up like a sinner in church. So you see, I can't lie to you. That rock knows what I am." The glow of the heart pulsed harshly in her palm, then dimmed. Steady, wary, as if it hadn't rejected him outright. "He's tethered to them," Elena whispered. "But not controlled," Malric nodded grimly. "Closest thing I can be to honest with you. I'm not their puppet, but I hear their whispers sometimes, their promises. Makes you doubt what's yours and what's theirs." He tapped his temple. "Carries a cost, living with their voices rattling in your skull every day. But it also makes me your best chance at knowing when they're near. I can smell their corruption before it blooms." Kian hadn't relaxed. His body was still taut with suspicion, his hand hovering dangerously close to his knife. "Or they use you to lure us into a trap." That too. Malric didn't even argue. He just shrugged, the weary curve of a man who'd rehearsed his guilt too many times to flinch from it. "But trust me or not, kid, you're already in the game. If Vex's pack is after you, things are moving faster than I thought. And if you're holding that heart, then it means the barriers are thinner than they were last cycle. Time's shorter now." The mention of Vex made Elena's stomach tighten. "He's alive. We saw him win the challenge. He's hunting us." Malric tilted his head like a wolf scenting the air at night. "Then you've got less than days before he tracks you again. The bastards have good noses and no patience." Kian stepped slightly in front of Elena, his instinctive shield against danger. "If everything you're saying is true, then prove it. Show us what only someone marked would know." Malric's teeth flashed again, but the grin didn't reach his shadowed eyes. "Gladly." He took a sharp piece of chalk from one of his many pockets, crouched, and scrawled a symbol on the cracked asphalt. It looked like nonsense at first, spirals, jagged strokes, but as he finished, the heart of Fenrir reacted violently in Elena's hand, blazing with radiant gold. Heat surged through her palm, the chalk symbol shivered, and then, impossibly, it smoked. Black threads of something not smoke, not mist, rose like tendrils from the design, writhing upward before evaporating. The scent of rot, of damp cellars and moldy earth, hit Elena's senses like a blow. "That's their sign," Malric said flatly. "The place I last faced them was crawling with these, burned into stone by hands you couldn't see. That's what it looks like when the veil gets thin enough. I can sniff them before they scorch themselves solid. You two can't." Kian's eyes narrowed, his teeth actually baring in instinctive disgust at the curling stench. For once, he didn't argue. Elena exhaled shakily. "So you really did survive?" "No," Malric corrected. "I just didn't die. That's not the same thing. The three of them stood encircled by neon blue and the flickering stink of the charred sigil until the diner door creaked open behind them. A thin waitress with tired makeup and a grease-stained uniform leaned out, narrowing her eyes at the sight of three improbable figures on the cracked lot. You folks okay out here? We're closing in 10. The moment of cosmic horror deflated into startling normalcy. Kian murmured low to Elena, "We can't linger. The heart led us here for a reason, maybe to him, maybe to what's next. Chicago's close. We'll need to start moving before the pack picks up our trail," Malric snorted, shoving his hands deep into his coat pockets. "Good thing I know Chicago's underbelly better than any of you shiny-eyed believers. Beneath the streets, where everybody forgets, there are places the shadows already scratch at." His amber eyes blazed brighter when he looked at Elena. Not with hunger, more like recognition. "You'll see soon." The heart didn't just wake me up for no reason. It knows what's coming. And if you want to survive what's waiting, he let the words hang, a predator letting the scent of blood carry meaning. Then he finished softly. "You'll need me." The ride into Chicago should have taken a couple of hours. With Malric leading, it stretched into something stranger, a liminal journey where the world seemed less solid the closer they drew to the city. Elena had borrowed the wheel of a battered pickup Malric claimed he'd liberated from a truck stop lot years ago. The vehicle smelled like cigarettes, coffee grounds, and something faintly metallic Elena tried not to identify. Chicago's skyline rose jagged and dark against the horizon, glittering with city light, but the beauty of it was haunted. Elena felt it in her bones, the same vibration the heart carried, humming louder the nearer they drew. Malric had spent most of the ride silent, staring out the window with the steady patience of a predator conserving energy. Kian, by contrast, looked coiled, like a bowstring waiting to snap. His shoulders never touched the seat, his gaze flicking between Malric and Elena as if he expected treachery at any moment. The tension thickened with every passing mile until, finally, Kian spoke. "Why should we take him into the city with us?" The words weren't whispered. He wanted Malric to hear. Elena kept her hand steady on the wheel, though her pulse jumped. "Because the heart hasn't rejected him." She lifted her chin toward Malric without removing her eyes from the road. It reacted to him, but it didn't burn him. Maybe that means something, or maybe it means he's their puppet and the heart can't sense it yet. Kian's voice sharpened. His wolfish profile in the passing glow of streetlights was all suspicion and defiance. Everything about him reeks of corruption. "Funny," Malric drawled, not bothering to hide his grin. "You reek of self-righteousness, pup. And that stench gets you killed faster than any shadow." Kian's teeth flashed. "Call me that again? Enough!" Elena snapped, startling even herself. Both men, wolf and shadowed survivor, looked at her. She gripped the wheel tighter and forced her voice calm. "We don't have time for this. The pack could already be closing in, and the keeper said the entities feed on Discord. Do you really want to give them a feast right now?" Silence fell. Malric smirked faintly but said nothing. Kian turned back to the window, fists clenched on his knees. Elena exhaled, relearning how to breathe. They reached the city just after midnight. Rain had begun to fall, slicking the streets, washing the air with the mix of exhaust and lake wind. Malric directed them off the crowded freeway and down into quieter industrial corridors, where graffiti-tagged warehouses loomed like tired giants and flickering lampposts kept inconsistent watch. "This place hums with hungry things," Malric muttered, stepping out as Elena parked in the shadow of a steel bridge. "Can't you feel it?" She could. The heart in her jacket pocket beat harder now, not alarmed but expectant. Kian emerged warily on her side, scanning alleys with sharp golden eyes. "Where are we going?" Elena asked. "The part of Chicago no guidebook tells you about." Malric led them toward a stairwell marked "No Access, City Property." The metal gate was locked with a heavy chain, but Malric simply tapped his scarred arm against the steel. It rattled once. The lock popped open with a faint hiss, the metal groaning as though repulsed by his touch. Elena shivered. The stairwell smelled of mildew and rust. They descended into darkness that grew colder with each step. At the bottom, the air changed, stale, damp, but humming with energy. Elena clicked her flashlight on. Its beam cut across vast brick tunnels lined with graffiti, water dripping in slow echoes. "The old freight tunnels," Malric explained. "Built nearly a century ago, then abandoned. Nobody remembers them except the ones who can't afford to forget." "Shifters," Kian muttered. "And others," Malric corrected. His amber-eyed gaze swept the tunnel. "Hidden enclaves, survivors, the ones who were drawn here by the same hum that led you. People who dream strange dreams and know better than to speak of them." Elena stiffened, flashlight beams skimming over a crude mural painted across the brick wall. A spiral dominating the center, jagged lines radiating out, strokes too black and glossy to be normal paint. "That's their mark," Malric warned. "Means they've already been scratching at the barriers here," Kian growled under his breath, half-shifted claws flexing. "And yet you brought us here?" "Because this," Malric shot back, baring his teeth in something that wasn't quite a smile, "is where the others already gathered to resist. You want allies? You'll find them in the tunnels, or you'll find corpses. Depends on whether we're too late." They hadn't gone 50 paces deeper when Elena's skin prickled. A sound was rising beyond the steady plink of dripping water. Whispering. She froze and turned, flashlight slicing down the corridor. Figures emerged from the shadows, 5 at first, then 7, then more. Not wolves. Not entirely human either. Their eyes gleamed faintly, some gold, some green, some... "Blue? Stand down," Malric said quickly, raising his arms. "They're with me. They carry the heart." A tall woman stepped forward, her silhouette lean and commanding, her eyes a piercing ice blue Elena had never seen in any wolf. Her voice was like metal striking stone. "Then bring them forward," she said. "If they truly hold the heart of Fenrir, they are either saviors or the gravest danger yet to walk these tunnels." The circle of half-hidden watchers tightened around them. Kian shifted his stance again, protective at Elena's side. Malric grinned as if he had expected no less. The heart flared in Elena's jacket pocket, green-gold light pulsing so brightly she could feel it against her skin. Every whisper stopped at once. Every eye fixed on her, and in the heavy hush of the tunnels, the tall, blue-eyed woman spoke again with solemn dread. "Show us the heart. Let us see if destiny truly chose you." Elena's fingers trembled as she reached into her jacket. The circle of figures moved closer with the restless grace of wolves, or the wary hesitation of people who'd seen too many lies. Kian stood pressed against her flank, half-shift already prickling across his skin, claws just beginning to show. Malric leaned back against the brick wall with his arms crossed, watching her like a man who'd set a trap and wanted to see if it would spring shut. When Elena pulled the heart of Fenrir into view, its glow spilled across the tunnel in living green-gold light. In the hush of dripping water and breath, it looked like a newborn star had been cradled in her palm. The tall, blue-eyed woman inhaled sharply. Others behind her muttered prayers or curses in half-forgotten tongues. Some dropped their eyes in reverence. Others bared their teeth, suspicious of something too dangerous to believe in. "It is true," the blue-eyed woman murmured. Her gaze locked on Elena, and her expression shifted between awe and calculation. "The keeper has passed the heart to new hands." Elena swallowed hard. "I didn't take it. It came to me, chose me." It sounded childish when spoken aloud, and yet the truth hummed clear in the stone's steady pulse. Kian stepped forward, his golden wolf eyes flashing hard in the dimness. "If you harm her, you answer to me." A ripple passed through the gathered figures, murmurs, some mocking, some impressed. But before the woman could respond, a new sound sliced through the tunnels, not dripping water. Not murmuring voices, a tearing. The heart flared violently in Elena's hand as a jagged line of absolute black split open in the far wall, like someone dragging claws through the skin of reality itself. The group froze as the air shuddered with pressure, sucking warmth from their skin. From the rift spilled shadows, not shapeless this time, but given rough, nightmarish form, tall, lupine silhouettes with burning ember eyes and too many teeth, their mouths stretching where no mouth should be. Whispers filled the tunnel, clawing at Elena's thoughts. "You don't belong. You'll never save them. Give us the heart and rest. Give..." She clapped her free hand over her ear with a gasp, but it didn't help. The voices were inside. "Shades!" Malric spat, his scars glowing an ugly black red. "They've found another weak spot. We'll never get out unless..." "They're feeding off the discord." Kian cut him off, his fangs bared as he shifted further into wolf form, muscles surging. He barked a command to the onlookers. "Fight with us or you'll all die in the dark." The blue-eyed woman hesitated only a heartbeat, then raised a blade of silvery steel. "Circle formation. Protect the girl!" Elena wanted to protest. She was more liability than linchpin, but Kian was already pulling her behind him as claws clashed against the first of the shadow creatures snapping through. The tunnel exploded in chaos. Shifters leapt into half-form, tearing at incorporeal beasts whose bodies still bled sparks when ripped apart. Humans with torches and blessed knives surged forward, chanting words Elena didn't know. Malric snarled low in his throat and plunged his scarred arm into one of the shadows. It screamed like ripping metal. He dragged it backward, pinning it beneath his two bright eyes. Elena raised the heart instinctively, and light burst outward, a cone of vivid green that scorched the whispering tendrils as they reached for her mind. For a precious few moments, the shadows recoiled. "They hate it!" she choked. "The light... Keep it high!" the blue-eyed woman barked, holding her line with vicious precision. "It weakens them." But for every shadow that shrieked and scattered, more came surging from the rift, clawing through as if the tunnel itself was rotting open. Kian slashed his claws into one that broke rank, blood, real blood, spattering the wall. He turned, golden eyes burning, and shouted over the din, "Elena! If they're crossing already, then this city isn't just a node, it's a breach." And then the rift ripped wider, the shadows pouring like a tide, and the whole tunnel shook as the old bricks groaned. Malric shoved his way toward her, his teeth bared sharp. "Kid, listen to me! You can't close it alone. But the heart will respond if all of us lock wills together, human shifter marked. That's the old way. Do you trust me or not?" The heart pulsed wildly in her palm, vibrating so hard Elena's bones shuddered, as though waiting for her choice. She looked from Malric's haunted, corrupted eyes to Kian's golden, furious ones, and finally to the circle of ragged fighters standing against the tide. It wasn't just her choice. It was theirs. Elena lifted the heart high, light blazing until it burned her skin. Through the roar of shadows she shouted, her voice stronger than she thought she had in her. "Then do it with me. Together." The heart blazed like a sun in Elena's hands, green-gold fire filling the tunnel and swallowing the shrieks of the shadows. Malric's scarred arm burned black-red like molten iron. Kian's wolf voice rang out in a growl that was half command, half prayer. Around them, shifters and humans locked hands, voices joining, wills woven tight. "Together," Elena whispered, closing her eyes and pouring every shred of herself into the heart. Not her fear, not her doubt. Just one truth: we belong. Humans and wolves bound to protect, not to conquer. The heart absorbed the vow, and the light surged outward. The rift screamed. For a moment, Elena saw shapes on the other side, things vast and hungry straining against the veil. But the heart flared brighter, burning those shadows back to nothing. The tunnel walls groaned, then stilled, the tearing sound cut off like a blade to the throat. When Elena dared open her eyes, the rift was gone. Smoke curled from the bricks. The silence of the tunnel was heavy but whole. They had done it. She staggered from the effort, nearly falling, until Kian caught her, gentler than any warrior had a right to be. His arms wrapped around her, solid and warm, his golden eyes reflecting triumph and relief. "It's closed," she breathed, her voice shaking with exhaustion. "You closed it," he corrected softly. "You let us." "No," Elena whispered, meeting his gaze fully for the first time without fear. "We did." For a heartbeat, the entire bloody, terrifying journey condensed into that single truth. They had survived darkness not because of strength alone, but because they had chosen each other. The Enclave gathered, bruised and wide-eyed. Murmurs rippled. "The heart has chosen." The old bond returns, guardians again. The tall, blue-eyed woman, their leader, stepped forward and bowed her head. "The keeper was right," she said solemnly. "The cycle comes again, but this time, we are not alone. You have rekindled the bond our ancestors let die." In her voice, Elena heard what the keeper had told them, that the partnership of human and wolf was not convenience, but creation. The shifters had been shaped by human hands long ago, as protectors, allies, not rulers. The lore was clear now. They were never meant apart. Elena felt the heart pulse one last time in her palm and then dim to a steady ember. It no longer yearned for proof. It rested, content, as if it had found the guardians it had sought. Malric lingered in the shadows, arms crossed over his scarred chest. His eyes met Elena's once, brimming with a pain she knew would never leave him. But when she smiled at him, soft, forgiving, he gave a little nod, half a benediction, half a goodbye. Then he melted back into the darkness of the tunnels. His road would always be between light and shadow. "He'll come back," Kian murmured at her side. "When he's ready, or when we need him," Elena replied. Later, when the tunnels emptied into dawn, Elena and Kian stopped on a quiet rooftop overlooking Lake Michigan. The sky blushed pink and gold, the city alive beneath them. For the first time, Elena didn't feel like an intruder in this world of fur and fang and ancient names. She felt like part of it, chosen by it, needed by it. Exhaustion tugged at her, but warmth bloomed deeper than bone. The bond between them hummed, not as a chain, but as a resonance. Two chords that made sense only when struck together. Kian brushed a strand of damp hair from her face, his touch both reverent and grounding. "You know," he said quietly. Wolves only bond once. For life, her heart tripped. And humans? Maybe, she whispered, leaning closer. If they're lucky enough to find someone worth it. The city stretched around them, dangerous and alive, but for that moment, nothing stirred except the echo of their shared heartbeat. When Kian bent his head and kissed her, it wasn't a conquest or a question. It was an answer, one she hadn't known she'd been waiting her whole life to hear. As sunlight finally cut the lake in gold, Elena felt the heart's pulse sync with theirs. Steady, calm, belonging. Whatever enemies waited in the dark, whatever trials ahead, they would not face them alone. They were shifter and human, wolf and woman, guardian and guardian. Together, they were home.